Hi there, and welcome to the show. Those of you who are regular watchers might know that I am currently out of country in London as of today. This is October 31st. Happy Halloween. But we do try to have content for you, whether we're in country or not. As such, this is another premiere. A premiere is a lot like a live stream, as it provides a chat. We find that the chat is so important for all of you because some of you like to hang out in the chat. And I don't know, maybe you're not even watching us. You're just talking to each other in the chat, which is perfectly fine. To give you full content today, however, I dug up the first 2 shows I ever have done with Mark Groubert. These go back to 2021 and pre-exist America's Untold Stories. A lot of people have wanted to see Mark and my first interview. Well, here's not only the first, but the first and the second, because the second episode I'm releasing here is with Mark and Robert Barnes. This is the first time Mark had an opportunity to meet Robert Barnes. So I hope you enjoy both of these shows. It's over 2.5 hours of content and might be a few years old, but I think they're really good. And if you like some history, well, this is the history of Mark and myself. All right, we are live.
That was English.
I'm with Mark Groubert. How are you? Groubert. Why do I always want to push your name? I don't know why.
It's like Stephen Colbert, Mark Groubert.
I know, but I would never want that association because he's kind of.
I'm only using it for pronunciation purposes. Remember when Colbert was actually funny back in the old days when he, was with. Let me ask you something. Where is Jon Stewart?
I actually saw Jon Stewart released a movie recently. Might have been 2020. It was not bad. It was kind of a good central political movie.
Oh, right. You're talking about the movie, his interrogation Middle East movie.
No. It was a movie. It's fiction. He directed it. Right. First time directing all that.
It's about a guy gets apprehended by.
No. It was
a second movie.
Oh, it must be a second then. Yeah. It was about a guy who lives in the country with his daughter, and he's a Marine, and he makes a statement to the crowd, and Steve Carell, a cynical political operator, said, "Oh, this is the next Democrat we have to have to go forward." And
must have missed this. I didn't hear.
It's really recent. It's really recent.
The first one was Watchmen, that's for sure. I think he wants to be a film director now.
I think so.
For him, as Hollywood completely collapses and there's no entertainment industry left.
I think he probably feels a little bit of responsibility for some of what's going on, even though I'm not going to blame him completely. He sort of started that whole fashion of I don't know how to put it, the style of just the mocking end of it.
Well, the snarkiness and it was very dark. I met him a couple of times. I mean, he's a very sharp, quiet guy, normally, and but so many of them are. I mean, the show was highly watchable for a long time. But
sure.
Out of that, we got Colbert, who is just clearly a political operative,
right?
Or which is where I was going with this thing,
Yeah, and that's the thing about Jon Stewart is, I mean, he's obviously, he sides on one side or another, but a couple differences. One, he was funny. Two, he was smart.
Right.
That right there, puts him a league above everybody who's on late night.
Well, no, it was a great stand-up too, which most of those cats are not. Stewart came from stand-up. If you think about the other guys, which is where Bill Maher came from, which what we were talking about yesterday about Bill Maher, some semi 149-degree turn into something, which we're not sure what was going on there, but he has been a contrarian for a long time, Bill Maher. Basically he's a contrarian.
Well, Bill Maher and Dennis Miller, I think, go well together.
Yes. Right. They're a little bit off the center of each other.
Mm.
And both, I don't know how to put this, but when we were growing up, what we would refer to as Bill Maher would be a Jersey asshole. That's kind of where this guy is at. And, like I said to you, I've met him a couple of times and he's got not a very good reputation in this town for what he is and has done here. I mean, he's the kind of guy that in a meeting with his writers, hit one of the writers in the face with a piece of fried chicken because he didn't like the joke.
Oh, good.
He's a guy who has a semen towel wrangler and a complete leather-bound collection of Playboy and masturbates before each show. That's who Bill Maher is, just in case you don't know.
Well,
Like, we all know, but you don't know, Eric, because
you were correct.
call a civilian.
Yes.
Our world, we know dirt about people that did one.
How about Norm Macdonald? Do you know Norm Macdonald?
First of all, I don't. I've seen him a couple of times. One of the funniest stand-ups of all time. Unbelievable, great stand-up. No, I don't know his private life or anything, but
That's part of why he's funny.
yeah, Phil, I'm trying to think back. I just seen him perform a couple of times. They had benefits, but wow, is he incredible?
Well, I brought him up because he made the point to Larry King, which I thought was very interesting about Bill Maher and Dennis Miller, and especially Bill Maher. He said that there are comedians who want to prove that they're smarter than everybody.
Right.
And he said, whereas Dave Letterman is smarter than both of them,
Right.
Bill Maher and Dennis Miller, but he plays the everyman or the dummy. He said, the last thing you want to be is smarter than your audience. Everybody will hate you.
Well, nothing could be more of an example of that is when Bill Maher met with Joe Rogan. Here's Joe Rogan doesn't need Bill Maher. Bill Maher's acting all arrogant and everything. Rogan was humble and he says, you're one of my heroes. And it just keeps getting worse and worse as he feeds this narcissistic aloe to Jim Maher, who just says, yeah, I booked myself. I wanted to come down here to see what all this fuss is about you and all your 10 million followers. And I'd like you to come on my show. And Rogan has no interest. He picked up on Bill Maher's show. And he's there trolling for guests. And it's really obvious what Maher is doing. And the whole half of that show, if you want to see Bill Maher, the first half of that show is Bill Maher defensive. The second half, he kind of loosens up a little bit. But his guard is up for the entire first half of that interview.
That's the brilliance of the 3-hour Rogan format.
Yes.
It really is, because it's like, no matter who they are, it would almost be a neat experiment to do that and then just cut off the first half of the show every time, because by the time he wears them down,
right?
Between
he wasn't kindness. He was, and he means it. I mean, this guy was one of his heroes. He wasn't bullshitting Bill Maher, but Maher just kept eating it up. It was kind of funny. I find it one of the best Rogan interviews of all time.
All right, well, let's start with it, because you almost got a job with Bill Maher, and I
know.
Tell us about this interview. What went down?
I'm only thinking about it because of what went down with Maher this weekend. Richard Lewis, who's a close friend of mine, sent me for this job interview, called up Bill Maher, I guess, to put it together. And just so your audience knows, it's not a job interview as we know it. It's not a sit-down interview. It's a little bit different. So when you show up for this thing, they prep you. On Thursday nights, he has a live audience dress rehearsal for the night after. And you are expected to play the role of one of the guests. Now, this is all told to me on Wednesday. On Thursday, I'm supposed to go in and become Ariana Huffington. I was a guest on the show, and I'm saying, do I have to do the voice? I mean, how much of Huffington do I have to be? Politically Huffington? They won't explain it. It's part of their game. It's like a logical game.
At least it wasn't Coulter.
Right. No. Well, had to be Ariana Huffington. So you go in, and there's a live audience, and it looks like something like out of Network, the movie with Sybil the Soothsayer or Peter Finch, hosting a news show. And you're there with two other writers who are playing two of the other guests. So there's two writers, myself, playing these three guests. Maher shows up without makeup. Looks like he's completely hungover. I mean, a bulbous nose. It's terrifying to look at. You're being worked on for hours when you see him on HBO.
Wow.
I went like, whoa, whoa, whoa. So anyway, so you don't know what you're supposed to do, you know. So he's doing his monologue and whatever he's doing, sitting behind his desk when they had the little thing there. And I'm watching him. I'm just getting spaced out watching him do his thing, right?
Mhm.
And he's talking about changing cars to, I guess it was one of Huffington's things, to helium or some sort of natural gas cars.
Oh, hydrogen,
Oh,
capitals. Yeah.
yes. Yes. Apparently, this was one of her things.
Yeah, yes.
So at some point, he turns to me. Now, this camera is shooting this, and there's a live audience, Eric. It's a little bit concerning for a job interview, as you can imagine. So, so all of a sudden, he turns and looks at me out of the blue. This is after 20 minutes. And he says, "So, Ariana, how do you think that we should get enough hydrogen to supply all the cars in the country?" I said, "Obviously, we're going to have to invade a planet with hydrogen to take it over." The audience catches me off guard, explodes with laughter. It's like a delay, and I'm kind of taken aback, and he's glaring at me, Eric. What do you
We just
mean?
upstaged him.
I just upstaged him. Wasn't intentional. I just said the first thing that popped into my head, saying we're going to have to invade a planet that has a lot of hydrogen. And then he was just daggers. They asked me a second follow-up question, which gave him the same kind of reaction. Complete explosion by the audience into cacophonous laughter, right? The show ends, everybody disappears. I am completely radioactive. And a woman comes up to me and gives me a gift basket with some cheese and wine in it and directs me to a back elevator, which is a freight elevator.
Consolation prize.
He tells me if I've got the job, nothing. No one will go near me, Eric. I'm just completely depressed. I wander through the halls. This is over at the CBS in Hollywood, by Fairfax. So I'm wandering through the halls. The freight elevator in the back opens up, and lo and behold, it's Bill Maher. His face. He said, "How the hell did you get here, by the way?" And I said, "Richard Lewis, a mutual friend, recommended me." And he says, great line, "Lot of good that did you." And he walked away and closed the door. And that was the end of my interview. I didn't get the job.
Did Richard get any feedback?
He did from me because he kept sending me to all these jobs where it was one disaster after another. He did the same thing with the Daily Show. He sent me for a job to New York.
Oh,
They made me stay an extra 5 days. And after the fifth day, they said, "We can't see you." And I flew back to LA. And again, just went berserk on Richard Lewis. I would just call him up and start screaming at him, because he does this. I mean, he means well, Eric. He means well, but he doesn't perceive that not everybody takes him as seriously as I do. Put it that way.
all right. Well, this is perfect. I hope everybody understands that this is going to be a scatter shot, just chat, because we have a bunch of background.
Unstructured.
Exactly. Yeah, and I'm going to live up to the name here. I have no way which way to go or anything else. So let's jump in. Gonzo journalism.
Right. So, okay. So, when I grew up, my heroes were like Hunter Thompson and the Beats. And when I became a journalist, I worked for the LA Weekly as an investigative reporter from like 94 to, let's say, 2008, 2009, somewhere in there.
Were you tied in with Gary Webb at all?
Gary Webb was at the Mercury,
I'm sorry.
Mercury News, which is all the way up by San Francisco. The
Okay.
LA Weekly is like the Village Voice. It's the same company in New York as Village Voice and LA Weekly.
Okay, sorry. For some reason I had
Anyway, but just to back up a little bit, I started from magazines. Like I told you the other day, I was an editor at National Lampoon magazine.
right.
I had replaced PJ O'Rourke as kind of the political editor after O'Rourke was fired, with others in what was termed the Saturday Night Massacre, where 90 women fired the entire staff.
And that was the 80s, right?
Yeah, that was 85. So I came in 85. I'd gone to a place called Bard College as a college student, which is a small liberal arts school up the Hudson, which Walter Winchell in the 1950s called the Little Red Whorehouse on the Hudson. Lampoon. It was three to one girls, and they were all communists. It was a great school, Eric.
I'm sure.
Anyway, so when I went to Lampoon, I started to do a lot of parody stuff, which is what I wanted to talk to you about today was parody, comedy, satire, and parody. Three things. The reason it comes to mind is because the Babylon Bee story, where they're being sued for not being a parody.
Oh, it's beyond ridiculous in that, yeah. And not only that, there's fact checkers who are checking a parody site.
Right, exactly. So I just want to get into what parody is because a lot of your audience
Yes. Well,
realize
and I want to know the difference between parody and satire. So let's step one.
as a professor of comedy, I'm going to explain that to you because there is a big difference. Now, if you look at The Onion, that's also just headline parody. There's no body to that. It's like a poor man's National Lampoon. It's just headlines with no story. We could do that all day if that was our desire, but we actually had to write stories. And when we were at Lampoon, National Lampoon, what we learned was how to parody mainstream publications. We would do a Not the New York Times, an entire issue of the New York Times in that style. In that style, we would do a Cosmopolitan magazine parody as Cosmopolitan in their style. It's very subtle, but we did a TV Guide parody, all the different parodies that Lampoon did.
I'm interrupting and I apologize. We'll jump back in, but Mad Magazine, would that also qualify for that? Because they do a lot.
Magazine also did a broad-based parody of,
Okay.
that's right. What we did was a far more intellectual version of that.
Oh,
When you're putting out an entire not issue of the New York Times, Eric,
sure.
and putting it on the newsstands in Manhattan, thousands of copies that people are picking up, and it becomes a news story that you've actually printed the New York Times,
Right.
on select newsstands, and in small print it says not the New York Times. That's a little bit more work. That took us months and months to do.
Did you do the New Yorker too?
Well, oh yeah, many times. Yeah, we did the New York.
You got to get to the high.
The Bible, Eric. We did the Bible.
Cool. Nice.
Anyway, getting back to parody, I'll give an example of what's going on with The Onion versus the Babylon Bee. They're absolutely the same mirror image politically. They're just on the other side of the coin. So I did a thing called Mass Murder of Baseball Cards, right? So it's a parody of baseball cards in 1985. Nobody had ever done this before. I saw the Associated Press had listed the top mass murderers in America as if they were the top home run leaders. Like, you ever see like Babe Ruth, 714?
Right. So Gary Ridgway is number one with the most kills.
Right. And they had them in descending order, just like you would see the AP style for the baseball home run king, which gave me the idea to do baseball cards of each mass murder. This became a cause celeb in the media. Nobody had ever done this before. Now they're everywhere. There's cards everywhere for everything. There were no trading cards. It didn't exist. And this whole thing, we put a lot of research into it on the back. We had little cartoons, their statistics, how many they killed, just like a baseball card.
Right.
Parody, that's a parody. That's not satire. That's a direct artistic parody of baseball cards.
Okay.
Just to give you an example, I'll give you another example. I did a parody, and this may be more relevant. I did a parody of Jeopardy, the TV game show.
Mm-hmm.
And it was called Sexual Jeopardy, the home game. It was legitimately just like Jeopardy, right? It was Sexual Jeopardy, the home game. Later, Howard Stern would use it on his show and read, because I had the questions and answers, just like to the board game. And we got sued by Merv Griffin. Merv Griffin took us to federal court saying this was a copyright infringement of his ownership of the copyright on the show Jeopardy. So I mentioned this as a great example, and this might be for Fry and your friend Barnes, who might.
Yes, it's the fair use and all that too. I mean, literally,
Right.
because you're critiquing them by parody in a lot of ways.
Right. So what I'm getting at is the federal judge in his robes in the court when we were there was reading my stuff, laughing out loud, and threw it out the case for parody, actually citing parody from the federal bench.
You know what I love about that is it would almost be worth going through the case just to watch the judge have to do that.
Right. I know. So really reading it, and he wasn't expressing his face, so we didn't know. Then he just cracked up laughing, and I just said, "All right, this is over." And he threw it out with parody. So that's a firsthand example of parody versus satire.
Okay, so what is satire?
Satire would be like Mort Saul and Lenny Bruce, doing a political take on things that's satirical, but not a parody of it.
Okay, so a parody is something that exists that you're mimicking or mocking, and satire is created from cold cloth,
Right,
possibly?
right, right. A satire is something that's your point of view, your take on a political event or a social event, um,
Okay.
that, like Lenny Bruce did, let me just say, Christ and Moses, right? Christ and Moses come down to St. Patrick's Cathedral, real bit he did, right? It's called Christ and Moses, very famous bit. And they appear in St. Patrick's Cathedral, and they're coming from the past. So it's kind of funny. What are they doing there? They want to talk to Bishop Sheen and Cardinal Cook and see why there's 400, there's room for 400 people in this chapel, and Puerto Ricans are living up in Spanish Harlem, 82 a room. Why can't they live here? So they end up calling Rome, and he says, "What am I paying protection for?" He gets the Pope on the phone. Becomes a whole crazy bit, right? From Lenny Bruce. But that's a satire. That's a satirical take on the Catholic Church, is what it is. That's a whole different animal. Neither one of these animals exists today at all, is the reason that I'm talking to you. Neither satire nor parody is allowed to exist in this McCarthyistic new space that we live in now.
Yeah, and that is a concern because I'll be honest, I like the Babylon Bee headlines.
So do I.
I like some of the Onion headlines too,
So do I. So do I.
but I actually I feel like we're in a weird state where half the real headlines could have been written by either one.
Right. There's a lot of parody. There's a lot of headlines that somebody just was printing. I don't know, it was Glenn Greenwald or Matt Taibbi that looked like parody headlines, but they're actually true. That I was
Yeah.
reading today, and it was hard to tell what's true and what's not.
Yeah, and so I am curious about that because I mean, you come from the world of comedy. Do you not see now people and articles and you just read them and you're like, they're actually writing this with a straight face? I mean, they're unironically writing some of the just insane.
Keep in mind, there was no chocolate laugh factory in Berlin in 1939. Stalin did not have a comedy club, right? Mao did not have Mao's comedy bunker. There's a reason that comedy is not allowed in totalitarian regimes. It's because it's indefensible on the part of the other side. They would have to have equal. When we were growing up in New York, you'd have like 30 kids and we'd rank each other out. We'd go at each other with satire and parody and knocking each other back and forth. And
Right.
it allowed us to sharpen our comedy chops, right? It was a game that everybody did. That side, their side does not want to play that game. So they have killed the court jester. The court jester was able to dance up to the toes of the king, mock the king, walk a thin line. The king would laugh, and the king would never kill the court jester. In any government you've ever seen involving a king in the Middle Ages, anyone that had a court jester, the reason the court jester was there was so that people could laugh through the court jester while living under a monarchy. They could kill the court jester. And that is going to disconnect them from the people itself. That's what Stalin did. That's what Hitler did. That's what Mao did. It's the same exact dance. The allowing of comedy allows the truth to come through. As you see every week on Saturday Night Live, the last person they're going to mock is Joe Biden.
Right.
A guy that I could write bits for in my underwear in the morning and mail them in and get paid. That's how easy it is.
Well, that's what bothers me about it is it's so lazy. You mentioned Colbert earlier, right? And I feel like all the bits are literally da 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 Trump. Ha, ha, ha. It's like there's no joke there. He's a funny guy. There's a ton of things to make fun of, but they're not making fun of him. It's just it's so lazy.
Well, the Trump era is over, so now the Biden era comes in. And I'll tell you this story because I think it might be relative. Joe Kennedy hired Mort Saul to be a joke writer for his son, Jack Kennedy, when he was running in 1960 against Nixon. So on the campaign trail, Jack Kennedy is spouting all these very funny witticisms. They come from Mort Saul, the original political satirist. 1959, he's working on the Kennedy campaign. 1960, Kennedy beats Nixon. Joseph Kennedy goes to Mort Saul and says, I'd like to hire you to stay on in the White House to continue to write jokes for my son as the president of the United States.
Mhm.
Mort Saul looks at him and says, you got to be shitting me. Are you kidding me? He said, I am now the loyal opposition, sir. He said, well said. And that's what Colbert should have said. That's what Bill Maher should have said. And all of these guys who revere Mort Saul deserve to take it up the ass because they did not do what Mort Saul did. Mort Saul said, there's not a question in my mind of working for the president of the United States. Not because I dislike Jack Kennedy. It's because it's not my job. My job is to speak truth to power through comedy and satire. And that's what Saul told him. And Joseph Kennedy said, fair answer. I will now dedicate my life to destroying your career, which is unbelievably true. Saul told me this in an interview. I did a cover story on Mort Saul for a magazine.
Oh,
And then he came at him. He just kept coming at him, Kennedy, through different means, The point matter is, here was a guy at the top of his game, Mort Saul, the Stephen Colbert of his era, and he just told the president's father to go fuck yourself. It wouldn't make him an Eisenhower supporter. You know what I'm saying? It didn't make him a Trump supporter.
sure.
He just said, not working for the most powerful man on earth to write jokes.
Right.
That's what I was trying to explain to you.
No, it makes sense. And by the way, a call back to Norm Macdonald. I feel like he's very much the same type of personality.
Same with Corolla. I mean, Adam also.
Do you know Corolla?
I know him just through Dr. Drew because he does a show.
Oh,
I mean, I haven't met Corolla, but I go over to that studio all the time. So,
Okay, yeah. Corolla definitely that way, but yeah, Norm. I mean, especially in his he would go for the jugular. I mean, Simpson, whoever.
Right. And that's what you're supposed to do. That's the point I'm trying to make. When you see SNL, which I haven't seen in decades, Gilbert Gottfried called it a famous old restaurant in a good location. It's a denunciation of SNL. But I mean, here is low hanging fruit, Eric, of Joe Biden. Right? I can make this, like I said, you can make jokes of this all day long. But for political, totalitarian, and socialistic, communist reasons, they will not attack this empty suit. Now that is terrifying. That's a new take in American comedy politics. That's a new situation. We've never experienced this before. They went light on Obama, but there were still people making jokes about Obama. It wasn't 100% shutout.
Yeah, it was thin on the ground, but yeah.
It was thin, but not like this.
It's funny. I want to ask you because we're both Xers essentially, and back in the day, Reagan was the enemy,
Right.
in the 80s.
Right.
And do you find yourself where you almost have to look back and be charmed by Reagan?
In retrospect, now I do. I mean, I looked against, I'm a liberal Democrat. The party moved to Mao's basement while I was busy having a career. And I woke up and all of a sudden there's jackboots marching through Los Feliz with swastikas on. I mean, like, when did this happen? I took a nap. I woke up. It was Berlin, 1933. I mean, I've had riots and right in front of my door here, Black Lives Matter and Antifa, going on a reign of terror here. I mean, they've become the new brown shirts to the left. These guys, they're brown shirts. They're shock troops. That's what we're up against here. When someone like Maxine Waters could airlift herself into Minneapolis and riot if she doesn't like the verdict, I mean, what are we up against here?
Did you see the after the closing instructions, what the judge said?
After the closing instruction, before the prosecution's closing arguments, or
No. After all the closing arguments,
I'm in the middle,
right after the instructions to the jury when he sent them off to deliberate.
I didn't see it yet. No, I didn't see it. I just TiVoed.
Okay. Well, he did tell Eric Larson. He said that she may have given you the appeal.
I know, but it should have been a mistrial.
I don't know, because here's the question. Depending on where people fall, a mistrial isn't necessarily in Chauvin's favor.
No, I'm not saying it is.
Or whatever. So
not expanding the jury pool past 250 people. I mean, there was a situation here in LA. I'll just give you an example.
Mhm.
When the Rodney King thing happened, the editor at KTLA and the producer looked at the film footage, the video footage they got.
Sure.
And first 5 minutes of the footage, the top of the footage, top of the feed, is 5 minutes of King flipping them around like King Kong in a movie, throwing them off of himself violently.
Mhm.
They
He was
just
on PCP.
what's that?
He was on PCP, if I recall.
Well, he was drunk and was on PCP, but I'm saying
Yeah.
he was in the beginning of the footage, the film footage,
Right.
he's flinging them like they're toy soldiers. That's
Right.
what we went to. Yeah. Right?
Sure.
That's what Swarm was about. Okay. So the editor at KTLA and the producer decide to cut off the head of that footage and make a decision. They win an Emmy Award for it, and the city of Los Angeles burns to the ground. So when the jury sees that footage, they're outraged and they realize these guys had to be acquitted.
Mhm.
Very similar story here. You know, with the body cam footage and the previous footage of Floyd being arrested in 2019 and the body cam footage of the other cop, all withheld by the media. So when the jury sees it for the first time, as Barnes has pointed out, a lot of times it provokes anger on the part of the jury that they've been duped.
Sure.
Anyway, that's what happened with Rodney King, but it cost the city of LA, you know, something like $5 billion in damages by these two schmucks deciding to cut that footage. That's the point I'm trying to make. Two knuckleheads in the media. See, I believe that we need a amendment to the First Amendment. I believe that there is the ability to not be protected for free speech by shouting fire in a crowded theater, right?
Well, I mean, yeah, that isn't the same thing. I mean, technically. I
What,
mean,
what I'm
that's
suggesting,
a call to action, if you will.
right? What I'm suggesting is what they're doing is the digital equivalent of shouting fire in a crowded theater while hiding behind the guise of the First Amendment.
Yeah, but here's the problem. Who's going to prosecute them when they're in
Well, no,
bed with the
no,
local prosecutor? No, I'm saying that there was a point of time.
yeah,
You were right, and they would have been held out or hung out to dry by the locals in that case. Even if it was just a case of like, okay, they do that, the police would freeze them out. Like, okay, you're never going to get a single story from us again. No cop is ever going to talk to you. Blah blah. Even on that lowest level, but nobody is doing it because they're in bed with half of the prosecutors. I know Emily D. Baker, who's been on the channel a couple times.
mhm.
She was a former ADA out there, LA area. And she said they can't stand that DA.
Oh,
They're
guess
trying to get him out. He's a complete activist
right.
and dirty. I mean, just beyond horrible. Beyond.
There's nothing wrong with the previous DA. I mean, the idea that Black Lives Matter would turn against a black woman DA and embrace a white Cuban born in Havana to be the district attorney of Los Angeles. If you would have told me that 5 years ago, I would have laughed out loud. But they
Well,
were
that's because Black Lives Matter as an organization is a communist organization. It doesn't really care about the blacks and you know, like I forgot oh, I feel terrible, but the girl who died in Kentucky, her mother has come out saying
Breonna
Black
Taylor.
Lives, yes, Breonna Taylor's mother has come out saying, hey, BLM has nothing to do with me. I have nothing to do with them. They're essentially seen as carpetbaggers for a legitimate cause some of the time.
Well, we have a new neighbor here in Topanga, a woman who bought a house here, the co-founder of BLM.
Oh yeah. I heard it's a nice house.
I mean, it's a great road. It's a great street.
Real estate's down there, has to be because you guys have a mess, right?
Right. I'm sure every house on Topanga went on sale the next morning. They had their real estate agents immediately on speed dial. I can imagine how fast they're selling their homes over there now to get out. And yeah, it's really bizarre. I assume they got, you know, a couple of weeks ago, or a couple months ago, I tried to find out where their headquarters were. And I traced it to a post office store, a postal store, and each city has a UPS store with a mailbox for Black Lives checks. And a guy shows up at 5 o'clock and takes the checks out of the little postal box and takes them somewhere. This is an organization that has over $100 million in corporate donations operating out of a postal office box in Seattle, Chicago, and New York. With
Almost
no,
like drug dealers.
yeah, with no central office, Eric. There's no place to go. I mean, it's a little unusual, but
Well, Antifa's even worse because there is no technically, or Boogaloo Boys. Boogaloo Boys are kind of the most wild out of the lot. There is no organization. It's like, hey, you got a Hawaiian shirt and a gun? Come on over.
I'm
Oh,
working
that's
on
it.
I'm working on a dark comedy about Antifa right now as a script. Well, network meets idiocracy, and so I'm reading Andy No's book, and one of the best scenes in the book is they're in the middle of a riot, and the truck comes by, one of those taco trucks, blasting power to the people, and they all take a break from the rioting and sit down and order and have like Che Guevara platters and the Castro burger and put their shields down. And I said, this is a comedy. This is network, Eric. I mean, so anyway, it's a project I'm working on right now in terms of screenplay.
Well, there are some, I mean, in the more organized areas that people are paid to come in. I mean, it is literally, I mean, you've been in the movie industry forever, and I figure that they're just kind of like extras. They get a day rate.
Right. She was in a protest union, which is it's like the screen
Why
actors
not?
for the major players, but there might be a minor thing like the SAG Extra Guild. Just get the Che Guevara platter. By the way, they changed the code on all the bathrooms. They had the managers change the code to all cops are bastards, ACAB. So they could use the bathroom during a riot. You can't make this up. I mean, I'm telling you, this is a dark comedy. You know, I mean, it's time to. I mean, if you saw their daily life, like, all right, 5 o'clock, we got to get going, Bobby. Get the shield, get the helmet. Come on, let's go.
Hmm.
Head over. Where is it? Same place every night. I mean, it's almost like they're spraying lighter fluid on the same building like they do in a movie set. To do take 23 courthouse on fire. It's the same goal every day. I just
You know,
want to
the
fly on the
worry I
wall.
have though, technically that would be a satire, right? Your script.
Probably. That's Eric. You're right, Eric. Now you're learning.
Oh,
Go.
okay.
This is
Oh,
cool.
that's why I'm here, man.
It's a master's thesis course in this, right?
Look, my worry would be, what do you do every time you write it out, and then the damn thing happens for real?
Look, that's not completely insane. If you look,
I know.
you look at Network, the movie, which we recently looked, and it looks like a documentary. I mean, you know what I mean? It's not that far fetched. And
No, I know. That's what I said. I'm saying it's a legitimate problem.
well, Idiocracy looks like a
Just
documentary now.
yeah.
Look, where we are now is we have a situation which I consider to be an extension of War of the Worlds, the radio broadcast by Orson Welles that frightened a lot. It's War of the Worlds, the radio show on steroids. Okay, mixed in with PTSD now with these people who are being asked or suggested to take their masks off. They completely now have complete PTSD because the media, like Orson Welles' War of the Worlds, which only happened one night, this has happened 450 consecutive nights of War of the Worlds.
Continuous. Oh, sure.
I mean, some people committed suicide during the War of the Worlds. There were people drinking. People did crazy crap. This is 500 or 400 consecutive nights of War of the Worlds, humble opinion. So now you have a phobia about removing the masks or seeing people without a mask on. That's one aspect of it. You have a post-traumatic stress disorder situation at the end of this thing. And now, from what I was talking to Dr. Drew about, I said, what I'm hearing is tens of thousands of girls, and mostly girls, but guys too, are completely addicted to benzodiazepine, Xanax, and Valium, who prescribed it during the crazy time of the past year. And to get off of those drugs is really difficult. So I think we've created, just like in the Civil War with morphine, we created over 2 million morphine addicts after the Civil War. They were handing it out like jelly beans. You know what I mean?
Well, the pharmaceutical companies are doing great, man. I mean, they've got that. They've got vaccines. I mean,
Right.
it's a good deal.
Right.
Good deal. I mean, and think about it. Well, we'll go back to Corolla. I quote him off and on. Now, it's like there's a limit to all of his material if you listen to him for a while, and then it starts to cycle.
Mhm.
But he has a lot of brilliant points. Like daytime television, when you and I were growing up, was all about trade schools. So if you were sick and during the day or faking it during the day, whatever you were, you would turn on the TV and it'd be like, hey, you can learn to be a trucker. You can learn to type. You could do, be a paralegal, all this stuff, right? Now you can either get a drug or you can hire the lawyer to sue the people who gave you the drug.
We used to joke about that because there was one for a plumber in New York. There was a commercial, vocational one, and we'd sit there stoned, right? And he'd say, "Remember, I can't call you. You have to make the first call." And we would just crack up from that, rolling around on the floor. I don't know why. It was the funniest thing in New York at the time, saying, "You've got to make the first call. He couldn't call you. If you want to be a plumber," which we didn't want to be, but we just thought, really funny. So
Sure.
I think he's right. I mean, look, a lot of this is payback for McCarthy in a lot of ways too. They never got all payback from McCarthy. If you look at the Trumbo film with what's his face from Breaking Bad, the one that won the Oscar a couple years ago.
Cranston?
More, Dalton Trumbo was a Hollywood 10 screenwriter, for instance.
No, I meant the actor Cranston, or
Yeah, Cranston, yeah, who seems to play everyone, LBJ, any historical.
he's the new,
Right.
He's replaced Kevin Spacey.
Right. Well, in the Trumbo biopic, there are more. Because I'm a stickler. I've done a lot of biopics. I've written a lot of biopics. LBJ, RFK, Oswald. I've done a lot. Abby Hoffman. I've done a lot of biopics, and it's really hard to do. You got to be able to take factual stuff, not throw bullshit in, and fit it into a 3-act structure. Very, very difficult to do. These guys, what they're using it for is political weaponry. So the Trumbo one, he was one of the Hollywood 10. So he was a die-hard motherfucking communist. There's no way you can confuse him with anything liberal. This guy, complete red menace, Trumbo. You know what I mean?
Was he like the Rosenberg? I believe it was a Rosenberg.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, they were like, oh, it was a crime. I was taught in high school, and I don't know about you, that they were falsely executed and they were evil. And it's like, turns out, oh, hell no, they were spies, full on spies.
I did a paper in college that they were innocent and they were full on spies. I mean, come on. These guys, were here's the thing with the Hollywood screenwriters, and this is hard for people to wrap their minds around. These screenwriters were getting notes. You know how a screenwriter gets notes from the studio? Adjust your screenplay?
No, I'm guessing. I hear, but I've never done it. So
Okay. So you get these notes from the studio, and they're crazy notes, and you deal with them, whatever you do, right? They were getting notes from the Kremlin. Let's think in for 5 seconds what I just told you. They were getting screen notes from the history has shown this, not that. History, like with the Rosenbergs, they had guys giving them notes.
Jesus.
From the Kremlin on how to subtly alter the message in their script to be more pro-communist. That's why McCarthy is necessary.
And did they know it was from the Kremlin? And that's the well, because some are idiots. I always believe in Hanlon's razor quite often.
These were true believers.
Okay.
Not the Hollywood 10, my friend. I mean, there's might have gotten, some sort of, notes from somewhere, but which leads me to a case of Groubert versus Spyglass. I wrote a script, which became The Recruit with Colin Farrell and Al Pacino, right?
Oh, somebody just probably got to play in the chat. Sorry. Now they get notes from China.
He's right. That's where I was going with that, because I was just going to go there. I have a friend, Shane Black. He wrote Lethal Weapon. He directed Iron Man 3. Kiss Kiss Bang Bang. He's written a lot of major films with Mel Gibson, other A-list stars. So he directs Iron Man 3, right? A lot of the money comes in from China, disappears. They pull the money back and they threaten the studio saying, if you want access to China, you'll do what we say. Okay. And what is it that they want? Okay. They want to take the film. He's done with the film, right? Take the film, rewrite and reshoot the entire third act in China as they see fit. So here men have bled to death over fighting with people like Harvey Scissorhands Weinstein over editing films and post-productions, fist fights, legal battles. The Directors Guild of America voted to allow China to recut American films as they see fit in China. So Iron Man 3 in China has an entire separate third act to that movie.
Wow.
Think about that concept. Imagine if the French had it. Imagine if Germany had it. Imagine if every country in the world just cut our films to fit their political agenda, how insane this would be. That's what we're up against.
This is what bothers me, or what I'm not going to say, this was what befuddles me. You live there. And is it a case, Corolla said this, I'm going to keep calling him back. I apologize, but I thought it was so true that if somebody doesn't talk politics, that means they're right wing in
That's
Hollywood.
absolutely true. That's absolutely true. You talk around it, talk baseball, talk the Dodgers. You know what I mean? Wait,
Yeah.
man, you just don't, you try to have some relationship. Sometimes they throw you under the bus eventually. And a lot of times they just want to do business with you. So you have ways to try to avoid it. I mean, look, even in 1997, I wrote a black comedy, African-American comedy. And I had produced Mambo Mouth in New York with John Leguizamo. I had produced Mo Funny Black Comedy in America, the definitive a 90-minute documentary on the history of African-American comedy for HBO, Eric. So I had bona fides in this area, even as a white comedy guy. So I wrote a comedy called Black to Africa, or whatever it was, and Fox bought it from me. And I said, all right, let's go to script. Let's get this thing going. They said, you can't write it. I said, why not? They said, you're white, right? And I said, what? And they said, yeah, you got to go out and find a black writer. So now we're on a mission around Hollywood, me and the two producers, interviewing one black writer after another to get them to do our project as a front. And nobody exists. So we settle on a guy named Darryl Quarles, who wrote Big Mama's House, ended up hooking up with Martin Lawrence later as his writer. We get the guy, we give him $175,000 of my money.
That's a good gig.
Right. He disappears for 6 months, sends us a letter saying he smoked crack for 6 months. He's in a rehab. Sorry. That was my project. That was the end of my project. Okay. And I'm supposed to accept that because somebody's grandfather was in Mississippi in the Civil War, while my family was in Poland in, 1843 in a shtetl.
So program.
So, but this was 1997, 98, Eric. So this is new, is what I'm trying to tell you.
Oh, yeah.
This is the most liberal place of the most liberal state in the most liberal city in the most liberal industry. And yet they have a witch hunt within their own industry.
Well, I mean, that's what says the left eats their own.
Right.
Then they came.
Yeah.
Poem.
Well, look, I was listening to Victor Davis Hanson talking about this the other day, how the Me Too movement came up to the door of Joe Biden. And they said, okay, we've gone far enough. And right, because he's got 12, 13, 14, and they said it's enough. They pulled the plug on it. And now that, luckily for Cuomo, he's in a post-Me Too, post-Biden era. And Hanson said there may be 100 women, but Cuomo's immune because he's in a post-Biden. What happened to Cuomo?
Yeah.
He went to
House Reagan's on his ass, and his is barely anything but a joke.
Exactly. But the point of the matter is, he's not Charlie Rose.
No.
Right. He's not Garrison Keillor.
Nope.
He's not Mark Halpern. He's
also not there.
Well, the player or not there. He's not in jail. He's not Harvey Weinstein.
Right.
Okay. You tell me just Cuomo and Weinstein.
On
one Emmy, the other guy's got 20 Oscars.
No, there is that. As long as Cuomo's Emmys for editing.
I don't know what it was. Press conferences.
That was a joke. I'll leave it to the pro here.
But I think it's payback for McCarthy is what I was getting at originally with this Hollywood 10 storyline. I think, look, Clinton was payback for Nixon, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's all payback all the time. Trump was payback for Clinton. These guys have long memories. A lot of them are still alive. I remember when Jerry Nadler was my congressman when I lived on the Upper West Side, and he weighed 450 pounds. And we were waddling down the street, and I said, I can't live here anymore. So I moved here, and I got Adam Schiff. I can't win either way. I've had two of the craziest congressmen in the history of the United States.
What's amusing is you live in the two areas that mock everything in between as flyover country.
Right.
But really, I feel that flyover country is what's the only thing that's holding things together, even tangentially.
Right.
And that's sad because it's being gutted.
Look, I don't know what the deal is. Did you read the Gutman letter? that Barry Weiss printed about the father in the private school in New York who pulled his daughter out because of the anti-racist teaching in this private school, Beersley, this $54,000 school in New York. I don't know if
I
you had a chance to read, like, one of the most brilliant letters so far that's been written during this revolution is written by the father of a girl he's pulling out of the school.
so
Because
I'm sure he's a racist.
well,
That's a quick answer is no. I mean, I'm just saying that, yeah, only time I see Barry Weiss is that she's trending, and usually she's trending, and that means that she's essentially stepped off the reservation again or whatever it is. But
well, eventually there's going to be enough Barry Weisses and Matt Taibbi's and Aaron Mate's and Glenn Greenwald's and Naomi Wolf's where there's just going to start to be too many of them to all be racist.
and yeah,
The
fortunately,
well,
we're carrying them. The people
that?
are carrying them, and that helps. Somebody brought this up in the chat, and it's true too. Did you know that some woke asshole in the UK said that the Luther actor Idris Elba is not black enough because he does not eat Jamaican food? I know it's true. That's true. That Luther as a show was not appropriately black enough because it didn't have enough Caribbean. I think they did say in the eating and representation. It's like, what?
I mean, it's like moving the game out of Atlanta to move to a white Denver. You know,
Yeah, where they have stricter voting laws, by the way, than the one
right, and a whiter culture in Denver than in Georgia. That's for sure, right?
Or how about in Berkeley, they gave subsidies to get everybody to do solar panels, but everybody wanted to make sure that their neighbors saw them, so they put them on the wrong side of the freaking house to face the street, which was opposite of the sun.
Now
That's
is a part people sun signaling. I like that.
Oh, hey, but she got to have it. It's like that's why the Prius was such a major bestseller. It's not that they gave a shit about a hybrid; it had to be a Prius.
The Hollywood the Hollywood thing with China that I was talking to you before was very similar to what Hitler and the studios did in Germany with us all the way up to 1941. The Germans were again editing our films. They were demanding Jews be removed from the projects, and Hollywood was doing their bidding in 1933 to 1941. There's a number of books written about it, which you may want to pick up because it's very similar tone to what's happening with China today. And we did the same thing. We did the same thing.
Political correctness was created by Mao Zedong, right?
Right. The Hollywood film industry buckled to Hitler. Why wouldn't they buckle to the Chinese now? There's a history and a precedent for this. I was watching the remake of Red Dawn because I'm working on a film called Blue Dawn.
Oh God, the first Red Dawn, by the way, did not hold up. Oh my God,
So I watched the second Red Dawn, and they replaced the Chinese army. The entire thing was filmed with the Chinese army. They had to go back and reshoot it with North Koreans. Did you know that?
I knew it was supposed to be North Koreans. I vaguely remember. Okay, that went down.
Right, but it's originally they shot it with the Chinese invading, and they had to reshoot the entire thing with North Koreans and North Korean logos and take off all the Chinese stuff to get into the market. And they wouldn't let them in the market. They fucked them at the end. The Chinese. They fucked them. They wouldn't let.
I'm glad to hear that though, because they caved. I love hearing that because they caved. They caved and they lost anyway. I think that's wonderful.
I like that story. I like that story. They kowtowed. They kowtowed and got reamed anyway.
Was it John Johnson said that Hitler learned speech strategy from a hypnotist and then had him murdered? I didn't know that one, but I wouldn't be surprised.
With that, I think I don't know about that, but
I mean, he was very big in propaganda.
Look, Goebbels. Hitler watched 3 Hollywood films a night with Goebbels in his studio. I mean, the amount of footage that he took in was unbelievable. How many Hollywood films he watched?
Oh, sure. Well, wasn't we doing amphetamines?
And he saw the.
No, I believe it.
Okay, so
and he envied it.
You could make the entire argument that the entire psychosis, because they give them this, what's essentially their version of crystal meth when they do the blitzkrieg. The blitzkrieg itself is fueled
Mhm.
by crystal meth, and they start writing back saying these guys are having psychotic episodes now. And you could make the argument that this butchery of the Jews, for instance, might have been amphetamine psychosis, because you see a lot of it
Mm.
today, for instance, with people on crystal meth who just go, "I'll be back."
Your timing was perfect. You actually
But yeah,
froze
I
when
mean, look,
you say the crystal meth, you froze.
When you get here, yeah, I think
the Japanese had it, and the Germans had it, and the French had wine at the Maginot Line. So they drank their 2 bottles of wine, the French, and passed out, which didn't help, but the blitzkrieg was rolling over them anyway, all the way to Dunkirk. But after that, I looked at the Eisenhower document that he signed to give our troops amphetamines. Eisenhower quickly adjusted, so did the British, to give our troops amphetamines. And on the form, it has exact numbers, but it said like 2 million doses for the US Army. He crossed it out and put 20 million. Eisenhower
Smart
himself,
man.
and signed it with his initial. Yeah.
Well, he was smart. I mean, it's like you can't hold against him. That's the one thing. The one fascinating thing about World War II and even one is that we didn't build a better tank, but we just kept building them. And we just kept
Right.
coming. Same way it's like we could afford to do 20 million. We could just afford to just keep throwing everything at it. And that I think eventually
Right.
tipped it because our tanks weren't as good. Nothing was good, but they just kept making them. We just kept making them, kept
Right.
coming. And
Right. But we
and
once, the only time we lost a lawsuit at National Lampoon was a cover we did that had an upside down Volkswagen in a bay. And it said, if Ted Kennedy had driven a Volkswagen, he'd be president today. And it was a reference to Chappaquiddick. And Volkswagen looked at that as slander and defamation. So we actually had to pay Volkswagen for that one. It's the only time we lost the suit.
damn, why did you have to pay because in the European market or just I'm surprised.
In other words, it was an upside down VW. Part of we felt the parody was they were running commercials where Volkswagens were floating.
Mhm.
At the time, there was a campaign for some reason that showed that the VW Bug floated.
Well, they're supposed to be made to float, I think, originally.
Right, right. So we said if Ted Kennedy was driving a Volkswagen,
Oh,
he'd be today. I thought it was pretty funny. But
wait, so defamation on Ted Kennedy more.
well, you can't. Yeah, he was still alive. I was going to say you can't defame a dead man.
No, but then you could. So that's
I
funny.
remember watching the Nixon impeachment hearings in Narragansett, Rhode Island, with the members of the Kennedy clan, and this friend of mine lived next door. It was in the summer, I guess, of 74, 73. And we're all watching it, and the guy comes down the stairs in his underwear, right? This is one of the summer houses in Narragansett. And he goes, "What's all the fuss about? What's going on?" It's Ted Kennedy, like completely blotto, his underwear, yelling at us to shut up. And he's sleeping upstairs.
Oh well, they were quite the clan. Well, folks, this is perfect.
Okay.
I'm actually going to ask one more main question, but this is going to be on locals. I can't believe the time went by. You're definitely going to be coming back because there's just too much to cover.
If I can suggest something, we may have individual theme shows on one subject in the future and just stick to one thing per show. Or if that's an idea. I don't know.
Well, yes, I've told everybody about you with the history of alcohol. And I
Mhm.
think that's actually worth an
Right.
episode because you've gone into that. You've gone into the rehab. You've gone into how it's profiteering business in some ways or it's legitimate and, all depends.
I'm also a
Um,
drug counselor, by the way. I forgot to tell you.
I'm sorry, what?
I'm also a drug counselor.
Yeah, you own a clinic from what I understand.
I don't own a clinic.
Or ran one.
Started one a number of years ago. We tried to do the right thing, but we quickly realized the business was corrupt.
Which is
It's a legitimate high-end drug rehab, but there was too much fraud.
wow, that sucks. That
Yeah.
sucks.
Yeah.
Well, for right now, we're going to go with, and I'm going to pitch the one question to you, and we're going to answer it in locals so everybody can see ahead of time and get the answer in locals. Again, I'm not going to make it hidden behind a paywall or anything else. Anybody can join it for free. I'll put the content up. It'll take me a couple hours. I got to cut the video and stuff to get it, but this will be just for locals. So until then, everybody, the question is, what is it like working with Oliver Stone?
It's a good question. I'll tell you this.
All right. That concludes the first ever interview I did with Mark Groubert. And we now go on to the first time Mark was put with Robert Barnes. I hope you enjoy this barn burner. And just think, today's Freeform Friday. Robert Barnes was a big part of what created Freeform Friday. So it's kind of perfect that this happens on our 4th year. Again, thank you so much. It really means the world to have you watching and supporting us over all this time. And here we go. Hollywood has decided to join us.
We're on Hollywood time.
I know. We have Barnes already, who's notoriously not super timely. So I figured, oh, great. So I got Vegas and Hollywood on the same episode.
Oh,
yeah, this is going to be a great start.
I'm so sorry.
Here we go, folks. Mark Groubert. Now, I was just telling everybody, my plans for this show are, I have no idea. I'm doing it like a Friday episode when I get the lawyers on, put really cool people together, have a lot of good ideas, and just set them off. Go. Let's have some fun. So I know you've been dying to talk to Barnes for a while. I know you've got a ton of questions for him. I'll poke in and have questions as we go, but really, I just want to have a good time.
Oh, you'll have a good time. Look, you paid the cover charge. You're in. It's a 2-drink minimum. There's no reason you shouldn't have a good time. You're, consenting adult.
Perfect. And speaking of consenting adults, one of your undercover journalist gigs was sneaking into a rehab clinic.
Well, it wasn't just sneaking in. It was acting as if I was a patient. I didn't sneak in. I went to the owner and told him I was doing a story. And the owner was the only one who knew. So I had to act like a detoxing coke, heroin addict among a bunch of gangbangers and different people who I normally wouldn't be with. And it was probably the greatest acting performance I ever gave. But it was only like 48 hours that the acting started to fall apart and I couldn't keep it up anymore. I think they were getting onto me, Eric.
So exactly how do you prepare for that? I mean, did you go Hunter S. Thompson?
Yeah,
I would say that guy, he's a method actor.
No, it was total, it was total Hell's Angels. I went in, making believe I was kicking heroin and cocaine, and they assigned me a daddy. They did an anal strip search. They gave me a 70.
A daddy? Is this
prison or a daddy? Yeah, you have a daddy, and he is in charge of you. It was very prison-like. And if somebody tells you, for instance, that they're going AWOL, you got to rat them out. And the second night I was there, a SWAT team showed up to take a guy down who was about to escape. A lot of them are on parole. Yeah, a SWAT team came in the middle of the night. A lot of them are on parole and, kind of a work release situation. So if they go AWOL from the rehab, they're kind of jumping bail and, violating parole. But you're supposed to rat them out. And I thought I'd be executed if I rat them out. I was in a tough spot.
Well, if they need to send a SWAT team for them, I would guess that that's a player you don't want to mess with.
No, but it's all of them. Well, it wasn't. I was the only guy who was in there, I guess, who wasn't ganged up. But
well, did you fear?
One of the rules was no fisting, no fruiting, no fighting. They had these 5.
Whoa, you said no fisting?
No fisting. Yeah. I didn't.
That's a very specific thing, and I'm not going to go into it, but that's a very specific thing.
I didn't get into it at the time, but they did say no fruiting, which I did get into. I said, "What is no fruiting?" And the daddy explained it to me that people will throw fruit over the wall that's got drugs in it, and you're not allowed to pick up any fruit from the lawn or the grass or the ground. Because inside of the fruit could be heroin.
Okay. Well, hey, I love people who are industrious, and We have Barnes here. Barnes, did you have any clients who ever fruited while they were inside?
I had not heard that term before.
Yes, it's very big out here. You see, you have to have the fruit on the tree, Barnes. You have to have the actual tree with fruit. So if your rehab is in Massachusetts or wherever, you may not have that situation.
So it'd be like maple coke
Maple.
or acorns. Oh God, that would be crazy.
Anyway,
Well-
I eventually got out. The guy who was the owner went away to Hawaii during the week, and I didn't have a contact to get out of the rehab. They wouldn't let me out until I got permission from the owner. By the
Well,
way,
perfect.
the place is pretty famous. It's a place called Impact in Pasadena. It's one of the toughest rehabs in the state of California. And
Barnes, you should know it. You were out that way, right?
You know, my experience with rehabs was no personal experience, but professional experience. I had a client who took me on a tour of one of the famous Hollywood rehabs near Malibu.
mhm.
And I remember having a conversation with the guy who ran it, and it was a bit shocking because I said, how do you define success? And he said, if they go to one AA meeting. And I was like, what? And then I realized that what my client had been hinting at was that at least for those rehabs, they're a joke. They're a place to go and camp and hang out and chill and be officially in rehab, but that they're not serious, and that the change of insurance policies, paying rehabs. Also, rehabs are very good at coercing payment because they say, if you don't pay the bill, we're going to probably have to sue, and I guess that will make it public what you or a family member were in rehab for, things
Right.
like that. I was deeply disabused of a good number of the big fancy rehabs, but that was just very limited experience. But I was kind of shocked.
Are
A
rehabs like
lot of them are legally connected because they'll put their clients in there to avoid or before a trial occurs. Very common out here to do that. I mean, there's a couple of models of rehab. The original one was the Minnesota model, which is Hazleton and Karen in Pennsylvania. The Malibu model is a model by itself, which is, equine therapy and other types of art therapy and whatever you got going on, surfing and shit like that. But I did a book called Rehab Nation, Inside the Secret World of Celebrity Rehabs. So I not only did I go undercover different rehabs, I learned stuff that was quite shocking. I mean, there's a rehab out here called Passages that's run by a guy who charges about $80,000 a month, claims a success rate of nearly 90%, and the whole thing's a fraud. But I contacted the FTC once about the cure rate that the guy was claiming, the medical cure rate, Robert. And they said, look, we got our hands full with phony cancer cures. We can't get involved in phony drug addiction cures. That was the answer the guy told me from the Federal Trade Commission. I never forgot that. But I mean, you're talking about, $80,000 a month. I've had friends and people I know go in for 3 or 4 months, for $250,000, cash. Now they don't take insurance, Robert. These are cash on the barrel places.
Oh yeah. Yeah, you have your own private sort of concierge effectively. I mean, it's basically they do it so that the people that are there are going to say positive things because it's not exactly a tough rehab, at least from my understanding.
Well, put it this way, Trump's first wife went in with her dog and a gigolo into Passages, and so anything goes in there.
Yes.
rehab sounds like a gym, or like a style of gym. You have the really high end where they have everything tended to, and then you have like the corner gym where you're sweating and bleeding it out with a boxing. Is it something like that?
Well, no, there's actually a class structure of rehabs. There is a working class rehab, which would be like Cry Help or Claire, which is in Santa Monica, very good $5,000 a month operation. Then you've got the Hazeltons, the Betty Fords that are the mid-range model of middle class rehabs. And then you've got the upper class, which are the Promises, the Passages, the places like that that are, $75,000 a month and have all the bells and whistles and a chef. Dude, I went in there, there's a 5-star chef in there cutting up sushi. It is what it is. I mean, the last thing they want to do is have you leave and go to a meeting. That's, with the great unwashed. You don't want to do that. But
Yeah, I had a friend that attended some AA meetings in Malibu, and they were interesting. I'd be honest with you, I found them depressing. I was like, if I was an addict, I wouldn't go to these meetings. They're more depressing. They want me to drink or do whatever I was doing more.
Well, it's the only game in town. I mean, when they invented this system, there was nothing. In 1935 when they came up with it. I mean, you either died in a mental institution, a sanitarium, or on the street. I mean, there was no other treatment, Robert. For addiction. So, I mean, what Bill Wilson and Dr. Bob came up with was this combo deal from the Oxford group. Well, it went all the way back to the Washingtonians in the 1860s in Baltimore. Had close to 2 million members, broke up over slavery and abolition of slavery, and also the temperance movement worked its way in there. But the Washingtonians were the first AA in the United States. And a lot of progressives are on that bandwagon. And it was a big movement in the Northeast that eventually led to the right for women to vote, the prohibition of alcohol, and prohibition itself. All of that came out of the temperance movement and the teetotaler movement. And teetotaler was not tea. Tea was for temperance. It wasn't drinking tea. If you people are confused about that. But if you go back to the beginning of the epidemic, it's literally the 1600s in Holland, where this guy he translates the Egyptian text for perfume into alcohol, distilled alcohol, and that becomes the first distilled liquor in the world. And they throw in juniper berries, the Dutch, and they call it gin. And that's where it came from. And that gin gave them Dutch courage, which gave them the money from the tax to raise the world's strongest navy and take on the world. And the other countries then used their own variants of that. If you had potatoes in Russia, that became vodka. Whatever your piece of shit grain was of your nation state, that was thrown into the hopper to make distilled liquor. And that was the cocaine of its era. And London would have like 30 of these distilleries on a street, with steam coming out every 2 inches of just raw gin, people falling down addicted to gin because the entire world was used to drinking 1 to 3% wine and beer. So all of a sudden to go from that to 100 was the equivalent of the cocaine epidemic, the crack epidemic in the 80s in America. And there were gin riots. They tried to put taxes on it, the British. Every country tried to do something with it to no avail. It was on. And that led to the people who came here to the United States, to Plymouth Rock. And they brought with them 42 tons of alcohol.
Before that, Jamestown.
Well, I don't know what they brought to Jamestown, but you could look at the log of the Mayflower and see how much alcohol and beer they brought with them. I don't know about the Jamestown logs, but when you see what they brought with them on the Mayflower, when they get here, they can't go back, and they want the sailors' dose. And the sailors are going back to Europe. They're not giving them a taste. So they land on Plymouth Rock, and they start to have the DTs. The first thing they start to do is try to build a still. And it takes them a while to pull that off, which may have led to maybe seeing witches. I don't know what happened up there, but shit went bad really quickly. You didn't drink water, put it that way. Every tributary in Europe was polluted. Nobody drank water. You could.
Yeah, and I was surprised by that. When I was in France, that's how they were explaining everybody drank wine all the time. It was just a much lower alcohol content.
Right, exactly. And they drank beer and wine until gin came in the 17th, 18th century. Then it was a crazy time, and nobody drank water. So when the original Mayflower people came here, they immediately polluted the rivers and streams. They shit in them, dumped their garbage in. A tradition as old as time. And they, didn't know what to do other than drink what they had. And they started to make grain alcohol using corn. We used what we had. That was our shitty product. So we made corn liquor. They down by you, they made something else in the South, but I mean, remember George Washington had to go and put out the Whiskey Rebellion, because their system of paying for stuff was they didn't have money. It was all with liquor. You take a cartload of liquor and take it into town and sell it. That was your monetary system. And all of a sudden, big government comes along and they want to tax the whiskey. Leads to a rebellion, Robert,
They actually still celebrate that rebellion in parts of Western Pennsylvania.
Is that true?
Yes, they do.
Wow.
When I was doing the 2016 tour, going through both the conventions and traveling through Eastern Ohio and Western PA, especially because of how important the constituencies were going to be to those elections, I
Right.
was struck. I went into some of the Western PA counties, and they had the annual celebration of the whiskey tax rebellion.
Wow. That's interesting. I
I
didn't
was
know
like,
that.
that's informative.
Right. Well, everybody comes from Europe and they start writing about how no one has seen anybody drink like Americans drink. I mean, the French show up, everybody's going like, what is wrong with these people? Why are they drinking so much? That's all we did was drink. I mean, even if you're a farmer, you made it halfway through the day and then you capped out, from grain alcohol. I think we needed slavery just to finish the day. We probably couldn't have built a nation without it, to be honest with you. And
What
they
was that? When I was in Cuba, what was fascinating was they don't have many alcoholics, and the reason is nobody can afford the alcohol. That they price things differently so that regular
Yeah,
food
yeah.
is very cheap, but
right.
alcohol is incredibly expensive. So alcohol is saved
Cigars
for
too.
special occasions.
Oh, that's interesting.
Cigars too. I took care of migrants and I asked them about cigars and they said, yeah, that's for tourists.
Yes, that's correct. I mean, other than the knockoffs they're selling to everybody that they're trying to sucker the folks into. Those cigars are much cheaper in Cuba than they are outside of Cuba, but still outside of the range because they use their currency distribution system as a social control system. And maybe a model for what's coming down the road. But I mean, that's how they really utilize it. That's why they try to keep strict controls. That's why they actually put controls on how much cash you can now bring into the country. You used to be able to bring however much you wanted because they needed the dollars. It was their only way to get it was through tourism. Now you can't bring more than $5,000 into the country. And in Cuba, you get into trouble. You're in trouble. So so consequently,
Unless
I
you're
mean,
John McAfee.
yes,
He
yes,
just
yes. I think
then they say,
he's
hey,
still in
go ahead,
Spain.
get out.
Where is he?
Yeah,
Costa
he's in
Rica?
prison in Spain now.
Is that
Awaiting
true?
extradition. He has multiple charges now. SEC
Oh,
charges that I think are a stretch. They're going to use him to test out new theories of criminal liability concerning crypto.
oh,
Well, if what they said is true and he pump and dumped publicly, there could be
Yeah,
some
but
shadiness in there.
to some degree. But at what point is that really an SEC? I mean, that's my problem. The SEC keeps going
Mm.
if it's Wall Street, I get it. If it's publicly traded security, I get it. These private deals, I mean, this was not a publicly traded security. And really what they were saying was he had an interest in it. But he had told people, everybody knew what his belief and interest was. So it's like, at what point? I mean, that's just it's when they want to just criminalize any particular course of conduct that they want, and they're going to misuse and abuse it. And they're going to use McAfee because, he comes across as half crazy.
right.
Right.
Today's the
The
first
AJ
day.
method.
Today's the first day I'm in the black on crypto. By the way, it's a great day for me. I've had crypto for months. Today is the first day I made 50 or 100, whatever the hell I made today. I've been in the red for months. Never got over the hump, and today, for some reason, I thank McAfee for that.
Okay. Well, there you go.
Right.
Have you seen that
Are you into
documentary
crypto?
on McAfee in Belize?
No,
Oh, yes.
I do want to see that though. I'm working on
Yeah.
something. For
There was a
Netflix.
part of it I wish I had not seen or heard
What?
about. Yeah, there was.
But when he talked about his recreational activities with the prostitutes, yeah.
Yes,
Right.
yes. I thought it'd be your regular run of the mill, and then I was like, "Oh no, I will never look at one of what do you call those things that you nap on outside? Those like swing beds or something. What do you call those?
Oh, hammock.
Hammock.
Yeah.
I will never look
Yeah.
at a hammock the same way again.
I was,
It's called Gringo.
I was
Yeah.
living in St. Thomas for a while in the 80s, and somebody invented the love swing. And it was kind of a hammock to have sex on. And they didn't have any furniture. And in their condo, they just had these bouncing up and down from the ceilings, on springs, these love swings made out of mesh.
Well,
Like,
who had a lot of that stuff? A client of mine rented a house from a famous actress
mhm,
who came on the scene, in Taxi Driver. And
mhm.
let's just say she left over a lot of interesting toys and whatnot.
Wait a minute. I got a feeling John Hinckley might be involved in this situation. So.
Yeah, exactly.
Or he
Maybe
wished he was.
maybe we can now understand Hinckley's obsession. I was like, she was into some interesting activities.
Right. Well, Hinckley's kind of linked to Chapman through this World Visions Christian Fellowship out in Hawaii.
That's exactly right. That's a future Hush Hush
There you go.
episode.
Oh,
Uh,
Barnes, I knew you were going to stumble onto that. That's a good one.
oh,
That's a good
that's a
one.
great one.
I know.
They
I'm not
sort of
going to talk about it. I don't want to jinx your hush hush, but
they loosely hint at aspects of it in the Mel Gibson movie Conspiracy Theory. They
right.
borrow from
Yeah.
attributes of
Well,
that. That's our first cinematic reference.
oh, thank you.
Oh, yeah, good point. Good point.
Very good. Well, I mean,
Speaking of which, I think
the fact that Bush
Groubert, you
was
wanted
having dinner with Bush's brother was having dinner with Hinckley's father the night before the assassination is a little weird. I mean, nobody could ever explain that properly to me.
so, oh, wait, repeat that again.
George Bush's brother, Neil Bush, was having dinner with Hinckley's father while Hinckley was in the bedroom, by the way, punished or grounded for not killing enough people or something. And a couple of days later, he shoots Reagan. I mean, so it's there's more to that one than meets the eye. I'll tell you that much.
No doubt. No doubt.
Right?
Yes.
This is why you're both on the show. So again, I'm going to sit back. I'm mostly a spectator. So let's start off with RFK.
Oh, with
Who
RFK,
wants to
yeah,
take it?
yeah. I did want to talk about RFK, because the Oswald stuff. Robert, I wrote like a 10-hour miniseries with Oliver Stone on Oswald, right, where we went around trying to sell this thing. It became the biggest dog and pony show in Hollywood for like 6 months, where people would just jam in there to see the circus, to see what was going on. And I'm sure there were spooks in there. I mean, my phone was tapped. Oliver said, "Don't worry about it. I've lived like this for years." And I would just say, "We can hear you on the phone." I mean, it was just becoming really weird. But at the end of the day, nobody bought it. So now what we're doing with it, Thomas Jane, the actor, who is a friend of mine, has a company called Renegade. And we're putting together a 10-hour radio play with celebrity actors, reading it with sound effects and video podcast. And it's going to be a podcast produced like the Mercury Theater with celebrities playing each part and sound effects, post-production, music, the whole thing. So that's going to be a 10-hour thing on Oswald alone, which is going to be a lot of fun because nobody really knows anything about Oswald. I mean, they think they do, but they really don't. You know what I mean? Like when he leaves Minsk and he's got his diary taped to his stomach and he gets to a clearinghouse in Rotterdam and he's debriefed by 2 agents there. And when he's arrested in the jail cell in Dallas and he calls John Hurt out of Nags Head, North Carolina, who is one of his ONI trainers, and they don't put the call through, but the receptionist at the jail keeps the paper out of the garbage, so we know the number that he called. And the guy, John Hurt, was military intelligence. ONI had a phony defector program, and they had combined with the other intelligence agencies to come up with 13 or 12 different phony defectors. This was also involved in the CIA, but they put them into these Eastern European countries, and that's how Oswald ended up in Minsk. He ends up in Minsk as part of this phony defector thing. And there's 12 others. One's in Bulgaria, one's in Romania. They're scattered around behind the Iron Curtain. And his job was to literally gather human intelligence. How does the phone work? How do you buy something in the hardware store? How do the trains work? I mean, all of that groundwork had to be done by human intelligence operatives back then because we had nothing else. And that's what Oswald is. He's literally gathering human intelligence in Minsk and initially in Moscow. I mean, he slashes his own wrist so he doesn't have to get kicked out and does this phony suicide attempt. They put him in a mental institution and they debrief him there. He's then assigned Minsk, where he begins to wander around. He gets a camera just like this one here, the Minox, where he takes photographs of military installations, that are later found on his camera. But that's what the guy did. I mean, that's what a bunch of guys did back then. How he got caught up in the assassination is, a separate story. But the front end of him, going to the Monterey language school up here by Big Sur to learn Russian, all of that stuff, like Schweiker, the senator from Pennsylvania, said he has the fingerprints of intelligence all over him. That's what the guy was being trained to do. And he grows up as a kid in New Orleans watching I Led 3 Lives, the Filbert TV show where Filbert becomes an undercover FBI agent. This is Oswald's favorite show. His entire family are spooks, the Muret family, Dutch, Lillian, the sister Dorothy goes all around the world, just like Obama's mother did as a teacher, going to all kinds of countries with teacher salary to teach little kids in Indonesia and Malaysia and Belgium how to learn English. That's what Marilyn Muret did. These were Oswald's cousins in New Orleans, and they raised him. They were his first cousins. His Eugene Muret, this is a great one. Eugene Muret goes to, because I know you must love Jesuits, Robert, and how they're involved in the spook world, right? So he goes to Spring Hill College, Oswald, because that's what lone assassins do. He gets invited to speak on his experience in the Soviet Union by his cousin, Eugene Muret. So Oswald shows up to speak at Spring Hill College, Mobile, Alabama, the oldest Jesuit college in America, 162 years old, to give a lecture on what, communism is like. And in that lecture, his wife, she has to remain outside because it's a man's Jesuit school. So she's embraced by a guy named Robert Fitzpatrick. And Robert Fitzpatrick is there to learn Russian. He's a spook. He ends up being the youngest city councilman in the history of Baltimore, Eric. You could look it up. And he then becomes the dean of students at Johns Hopkins, becomes the dean of students at Columbia University. He gets involved in all kinds of different things. He becomes the head of Euro Disney, this guy, Robert Fitzpatrick. But his claim to fame was he became a pen pal to Marina Oswald. And they were trying to set him up as her handler. And she's then handled off to Ruth Paine via George de Mohrenschildt, and Ruth Paine and her have a lesbian relationship. She demands that her love letters be given back by the Warren Commission. And I've read them. They're hot. Those love letters are hot. And she does get them back from the Warren Commission, thank God, But
well, I hope they kept copies.
I have some copies. They're quite erotic, Eric, and I don't want to read them.
Well, I'm old enough, I promise.
All right. Anyway, so there's a lot of stuff about Oswald that, people don't realize. They just, buy into the myth. And there was so much material. I literally wrote 10 hours, Robert, of stuff on Oswald. It's a 5-part, 2 hours each, 10-hour miniseries, that Netflix looked at us like, this is going to cost us $800 trillion to make, but we're going to turn it into a podcast. So there'll be some interest.
It is amazing the way the people will buy into fake narratives. Because it was, Oswald's background was right away a sign of who was involved in the assassination of JFK.
Right.
But like an example, we're going through one right now with Navalny. If people dig into Navalny's history, he's not some great outsider leader. Navalny is a career fraudster who gets in trouble. There's probably a good number of people who want to kill him for other reasons, extortion schemes, fraud schemes. But independent of that, look at where he was in, say, 2010 and who he was training with and who he was meeting with, or who he just met with in Germany. I mean, he's someone who's tried to play the West to get promoted by the West into being a destabilizing agent in Russia. The problem is he has almost no popularity of any kind. They have to gin up protest for him, and they have to manufacture stories. And I run into tons of people who believe the Western version of Navalny without any doubt whatsoever. Just like Magnitsky and the Bill Browder nonsense.
Oh, right. Yeah. Well, I've always said that America has its propaganda megaphones pointed inward. The Soviet Union had them pointed outward.
Yes,
Our
exactly.
propaganda goes to us, the people who live here. Other regimes point out.
When it applies to foreign policy or controversies like the assassinations, we tend to just buy into whatever the institutional narrative is. It's easier with foreign nations because we're not there. We don't have any lived experience. But I'll often ask people, because probably my most dissident opinion is on Russia and Putin. Probably second is that OJ is innocent of the murders. That's the other one. But that's the one I'll get major pushback. And it's always fascinating to me because I'll ask people, okay, well, what are your sources? And when they really think about it, they realize their sources are CNN. Their sources are the New York Times. Their sources are the CIA. And it's like, hold on a second. In a whole bunch of areas, not to trust these sources, but suddenly you do about some place you've never been and a country you don't know much about and a leader you don't even like. One of the things I like to ask people is, if I was going to judge a political figure somewhere, then one good way to do so is to read what they wrote, listen to them speak. Putin routinely, for example, does these massive press conferences with foreign press. I mean, the only guy that came close to ever doing that anywhere was Trump. And Putin did it in greater detail, frankly, than Trump did. And he does it all the time. It's like,
Well, he
it's
has
a,
that end of the year one where he has every single outlet in the media in the country. No,
exactly.
Oliver told me he speaks very good English, by the way.
Yes, he does. He kind of, he decides not to
Yes,
show that off
yes,
frequently. But like,
yes.
so when Stone was interviewing him, he'll just repeat everything and respond in Russian and whatnot.
Yeah,
Part
yeah.
of that national pride and whatnot. And Stone's
Right.
stuff was very insightful and informative in that respect.
It
But
was, right?
Stone has sort of followed where things go. And it was once you understand how Vietnam works and understand how other things work, then you understand to apply that same model across the board. Make independent investigation, try to get original sources, try to get primary sources, try to go to the source, try to understand what the template is for how these operations work.
Mhm.
And I mean, I came to all this conclusion accidentally, kind of. I went to Russia with several friends. The people that I was going to Russia with, this was back in 04, 05. They were one of them was native Russian, but had grown up in the States, anti-Putin. Their older generation were sort of in between, had negative things to say about him, positive things to say about him. But I went there with all the Western impression of Putin, that, terrible guy, dictator, no free press, no free speech, totally corrupt system, wants to dominate the world. He's crazy. He's another mini Hitler. All of which should have been warning signs in my head, because everybody that the West doesn't like and that the establishment doesn't like and deep state operators don't like is somehow Hitler. Makes you wonder about Hitler's rise, but that's another story.
Right.
But I get over there and I meet every working middle class Russian I meet loves Putin without any doubt. And I was
Well,
like, hold on a second.
he's the block between them and the corrupt oligarchs, right, Robert?
Correct. Yes. Yeah. Russia was supposed to be taken apart the way the rest of Eastern and Central Europe kind of were partially taken apart, definitely Yugoslavia. But the goal being to make Russia weak forever and to extract its land, extract its labor at the cheapest price.
Right.
In the 90s, the West, really beginning the mid 80s, Russia was wide open to the West, did whatever the West really requested. And what it led to was crime quadrupling, poverty quadrupling, basic housing problems all over the place, and oligarchs and mafia running their country. And Putin just came in and reversed all of that. That's why the Clintons are never going to forgive him. They were going to get fabulously rich off of Russia. The Clinton Foundation was meant for Russia, but for Putin.
Right.
They had to look elsewhere instead. But it's just because he's independent. I've watched hundreds of hours. What happened is, once I got over there and realized that at least one big lie I had completely, bought, and then realized my sources were dubious sources. I try to filter things through a trial lawyer perspective. It's like, if I was in trial, what's my evidence? Who's my witnesses? That's why I really like the way Stone did JFK. He did that in substantial part, like it was even though he was talking about a trial, he incorporated those narrative concepts into it to present it in a way that I thought was particularly effective. But in the context of that, I realized all of my sources were dubious that I had trusted. They were sources I should know not to trust, and they were all secondary sources and hostile, adverse sources with a history of lying in precisely this space.
Right.
So then just started going to as many primary sources as possible, read what Putin had said, read more of the history of Russia, watch Putin's interviews. And I was like, man, and so that was my first filter. And the second filter was, well, can I start to predict better how Russia's going to do things than the Western interpretation or anti-Putin interpretation is? And without fail, the Western interpretation has been horribly wrong in their predictions about how Putin would do this or say this or say
Well,
that.
it's more like wishful thinking than predictions, I think.
Completely. It's things they want to project.
Push this guy. I miss Stephen F. Cohen now, who's been dead for a year.
Well,
he was a breath of fresh air, Cohen.
Completely.
That guy knew everything that was going on. He kept yelling it from the highest mountaintop to no avail.
He's one of the best Russian experts the West has ever had, and very independent. And so once you dig into it, and then you start to see the color revolutions and the rest, you study Navalny a little bit or other characters like it, and you start to know what the script is going to be before they write it. My favorite part
was this a color revolution we just went through here, Robert?
Well, that's what a lot of people were saying beforehand. But what was amazing was how many people didn't know that terminology when people like the guy that Darren Beatty with Revolver and others were talking about it on Tucker. Most people were like, color revolutions, what's that? Because most of them believed in the color revolutions.
Right.
Those were great democratic revolts. The Arab Spring was just an independent, honest, sudden movement of authentic people. Wait until they vote in the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt. Good luck with that. And so one example after the other, there's aspects of it. They borrowed what we did with Yeltsin in 1999, where we basically pushed him over the edge. I mean, it was the same magazine, I think. I think it was the same Time magazine that bragged about fixing that election.
Right. Well, who was the guy, the Color Revolution, like Greer or someone? The guy who started it?
Well, I mean, there's different people. I mean, there's the people that are in Serbia itself who now sort of exported around the world.
Right, but there's the
Einstein,
American guy who's written the books about it.
yeah.
That's
Well, there's the guy who created the ideas for it at
Right.
the Einstein Institute, which really
right.
just
The Einstein Institute. That's what I was thinking of. Right. Yeah. Yeah.
and he's just an independent genius. I don't think he quite realizes how it's been used.
Right.
But a lot of what he teaches, I recommend to people because it's about, the fifth pillar of powers, the perception of the other four pillars of power.
Right.
Remove that fifth pillar and the whole thing collapses. It's what I've told, if people on the left or the right were smart, you try to get ordinary cops and soldiers on your side. You don't try to be hostile and adverse with them. Maybe a weakness with Michael Malice's anti-cop rants. I get it from an anarchistic perspective.
Well, I was going to ask that about Putin too, because he was born in the Soviet Union, and somebody in the chat brought this up, which is all part of it with Michael Malice. So definitely want to jump in. What about North Korea?
No, North Korea, they're right about. I mean, and that's the difference. Like, for example, if you're going to, I once visited Venezuela when Hugo Chavez was in charge, and there's always talk of no freedom of press. And I get there, and 95% of the press spends all day bashing him, and I'm like, no freedom of the press, eh? So it's like, okay, I've been to Cuba. There ain't no freedom of press in Cuba. There's no freedom of there's kind of freedom of speech. Like, here's what I mean: you go to Cuba. Anybody on the street will come up to you and tell you how much they dislike the Castros or the regime or anything else. I'm like, okay, it's not quite as oppressive as people made it, but there's zero free speech.
Well, okay, fair. I got to push back on Cuba because I sat there taking care of 100,000 refugees.
What?
And,
you mean you were at Guantanamo?
Yeah, I was.
You mean refugees coming into Cuba or refugees from Cuba?
From Cuba. Remember when they did?
Now here's a question:
turned them back and put them all on Gitmo.
Yeah. Now,
well,
how many of them were white versus black?
That's a good question.
It's a full mix.
It was.
Was it 50-50?
I would say maybe about 45%, 40 to 45% black and 50-something%.
Well, that's much more equal because historically, most of the people that have escaped Cuba have overwhelmingly been white, even though the country is half black. So
no. It was like if you took a city, well, actually a southern city specifically, and you threw it down there. No, it was pretty mixed.
Now, when was this? Mid-90s, late 90s?
Yeah, it was 96, 97.
Well, they went the crisis period was terrible. And I'm not saying, like I said, Cuba doesn't have freedom of press. Cuba doesn't have free elections. Cuba doesn't have a free legal system.
Well, and that was shaping to me because, and that's something I keep pushing people back. I did not realize, one, I'm talking to the people and they're watching their relatives die as they're getting the water. And that's a statement. I feel like if you're throwing yourself in the ocean to get the hell out of it, you're voting with your feet. That tells me you're in a bad spot.
Well, particularly in the early 90s, they solely depended on Soviet support. So when that collapsed, they were raising animals inside the bathtub to be able to eat. So
you should have seen them when a banana rat would show up.
Oh, it was terrible time.
Interesting.
Now, I'd like to know, how does Joanne Chesimard survive down there? Who covers her? How does she protect it that this woman is allowed to live in a prosperous situation in Cuba? I mean, this is a cop killer.
Well, she's a celebrity.
There's really two different parts of Cuba.
Right.
Well, three parts. The Soviet period. There's also the pre-Soviet period. I mean, from 59 to 68, they actually still had small business in Cuba, so on and so forth. Then from about 69 to 90 is sort of peak of prosperity for Cuba. That's where you have huge generational differences amongst the Cuban population as to how they perceive the Cuban Revolution.
Right.
If they grew up in the 70s and 80s or before, they tend to have a slightly more positive view. They still, all of them have complaints. But if they grew up in the 90s to afterwards, mostly negative. Now, some of that negativity is mythological. So Cubans really believe, but for Fidel, they would be as wealthy as Miami.
Right.
And it's like, why don't you go over to the Dominican? Here's my point. Are they escaping to the Dominican Republic? Are they escaping to Haiti? So that so that tells you a little bit about,
or even Jamaica.
Or Jamaica. None of them. They're not trying to get there at all for the most part. So that gives
Mhm.
you some idea of the comparison. And economically, they're not radically different in terms of resources than, say, the Dominican Republic. GDP is about the same. The
Mhm.
criticisms of Cuba is it's clearly a dictatorship and totalitarian country by all measurements.
Right.
The
Mhm.
Some of the other criticisms, I
Well,
mean,
it's
the
a hunter,
healthcare
I think,
system
more than
is
a
very good.
dictatorship. Is Raul in charge or is it a junta?
He just stepped down,
Right.
and it's the sort of the elite around, and really the elite around Raul has really been running the country probably for since Fidel had his health problems.
Right.
So, which is really sort of late 90s, early, I think it was 03, 04
You're
actually.
saying that this is Raul Biden you're talking about, right?
Yeah. Well, yeah, exactly. So
Not that different. The
well,
Clinton
and
Foundation.
it's actually very analogous
For
in
the
many respects in the sense of institutional corrupt power.
Yeah.
But what was interesting was things I didn't know were I didn't realize the lack of alcoholism. I was like, that's interesting. Lack of drug abuse. That now you have to have a totalitarian country to get to the point where you can't
It
get
helps
drugs.
if you're a tiny island and you can control the coast also, Robert. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. So so that's the downside, to that obviously. But I was intrigued that they had a lot of the things they take for granted, particularly the younger generations, they don't realize is rare because they don't travel to to other comparable GDP islands. They
Right.
only see it's either Cuba or Miami. So
Right.
they think Cuba would be like Miami, but for Fidel.
Well,
Um,
look at Jews. It's either Tel Aviv or Brooklyn. I mean,
yes, yeah, exactly. It's
it's
a
not that
similar.
crazy. I get it. How many places are we going to go? I'm going to tell
Oh,
you.
come on. They go to Florida too now, Mark.
I know. Well, that's where you go. God's lady. Believe me, all of my surviving relatives' bones are down there now. But I'm going to tell you a genetic secret about addiction. The later that your culture is exposed to alcohol and drugs, the more addicts there are. In other words, the Native Americans have a addiction level in the low 90s, high 80s. And the United States, Americans in the world, it's mostly 10% across the board. So it's a Darwinian thing that you have not died yet. Your culture has been exposed, like the Native Americans less than 200 years ago, to grain alcohol. They have to die for generations in order to lower that number. That's why they have such incredibly high alcoholism rates on the reservations. The same is true, to prove the chemical point, of Aborigines in Australia. Exposed to it 200 years ago, 90% addiction levels in Australia. The same situation on both parts, which there's an enzyme called androgenesis that they say may be linked to that. And
You've
that
talked to
enzyme isn't.
Drew a lot. You've spent a lot of time with Dr. Drew.
Yeah,
And that's making me think too. He's saying that there's a definite correlation with the daredevil gene and alcoholism now.
that's true.
And
That is
if
true.
you look, America was settled by
Alcohol.
especially Jamestown, and that's why I pushed back earlier because Jamestown was first. And those guys were borderline criminals, rogues, and they were adventurers.
Did they end
were
up
not
eating
welcome
each
at home.
other?
Huh?
What's that?
Didn't they end up eating each other in Jamestown?
It could
No,
happen.
no. That's Roanoke,
Roanoke.
up North
You're right,
Carolina, and
Roanoke.
they integrated with the Indians. They've gotten the DNA now that's pretty much shown. Yeah, they just went in, mixed, went native.
Well, put
Which,
it this
by the way,
what group is going to pick up in Europe and leave? Someone who's got a middle class, perfect life? No, it's going to be people who are indentured servants, criminals, alcoholics, adventurers, nuts, and those are the people, religious fanatics, Robert. Who came over as the Puritans.
Yes.
Those were our settlers. That's why. And there is a arc that even artists have, a rocket-like arc when you're a drug addict, like a Jimi Hendrix or people who died at 27 in rock and roll. The alcohol and drugs can fuel your creativity like a rocket to stardom. However, it's not sustainable. It's not physically sustainable. So you see a lot of people peak at the age of 27 to 32 and die. But there is a lot of upside to being that daredevil person that Drew was talking about in the arts and also in politics. I mean, LBJ drank 2 quarts of Cutty Sark a night, then ran around the White House with yelling the N-word to anyone he encountered, right? He would take his aides and he'd put them in the swimming pool naked. And when they came out, he would say, "You call those cocks? Take a look at this." And he'd take Jumbo out and he'd show them Jumbo. And this is considered the most successful president we've ever had. This is a guy who was a megalomaniac, an alcoholic, bipolar, complete sex addict, according to both, Bill Moyers and Dick Goodwin, who went to 2 separate top psychiatrists in DC, told the psychiatrists separately, the characteristics of their client, didn't name him, came back together, compared notes, and came back with the same exact diagnosis. Bill Moyers and Dick Goodwin, the speechwriter. So Goodwin says, I got to get out of here. So Moyers says, where am I going to go? I'm with LBJ. So Goodwin goes to LBJ, hands in his resignation, and he says, son, you ain't going nowhere. You're going to Vietnam next week. And Goodwin goes, what? He goes, that's right. I just drafted you, son. That's where you're going. And Goodwin goes, you can't do that. He goes, I have a contract to go teach at Antioch, which he had. He was leaving. And LBJ says, you ain't going nowhere but the bush, son. And he tore up his resignation and he stayed on, Dick Goodwin. You know, but you're talking about someone who succeeded with alcoholism. Look at LBJ, complete maniac.
Well,
Well,
speaking
yeah, I
of
mean-
succeeding, he succeeded after somebody else who died.
Yeah.
Right.
Right?
Well, when he
Right.
knew
What a
his,
coincidence that he died in his backyard. You know, a lot of people said if JFK had survived Dealey Plaza, the next day was the LBJ ranch, and he was not getting out of that ranch alive. That was the final destination of that train, according to my sources. They were going to have guys in the woods, and he was not. You know, he took Robert Kennedy there once, LBJ, and there's a lot of information about their hatred, how much these two guys hated each other's guts. You know, how LBJ said he was going to cut RFK's throat. I mean, there's a lot of people who believe, as I do, that LBJ was involved in all three assassinations, MLK, JFK, and RFK. And
What about Hoover? Hoover hated Kennedy, Robert Kennedy too, didn't he?
right, but that was just a hatred. That was not a guy who was going to make moves like that. LBJ was the guy who did make moves like that historically multiple times. Talk to the heirs of Mac Wallace and you'll find out whether LBJ ever had people killed around Austin. You know, I mean, this guy was a maniac. This is not the guy who is Bryan Cranston in a one-man show on Broadway. That's propaganda. That's not who this guy was. This is a guy who pulled in a gas station and there'd be a black teenager, you know, doing the gas station, and they'd have the kid open up the trunk. There'd be a rattlesnake in there just to get some laughs on a black teenager. You know, this guy was a mad dog. He was a mad dog. And, you know, look, it is what it is, but this guy was so dysfunctional and so crazy that he was about to be kicked off the ticket. He was about to be indicted, as Robert might remember, because of the scandals that were swirling around him right before in October, November of '63. He was on the front page. He was supposed to be on the front page of Life magazine about the Bobby Baker scandal. Unfortunately, there was a bigger story in Dallas that week, so they had to change the cover.
Okay,
Well,
so couple questions. Why then did he step out? Why didn't he go for a re-election? I mean, if it was that important for him to hold the power, I'm genuinely asking because I'm learning here.
So the story is that he was bipolar and he was manic depressive. And when he was manic, he gave shit away. And when he was depressed, he bombed the shit out of Hanoi. So there was two different LBJs at that point. And he had grilled and taken Humphrey under his wing, where he believed that Humphrey would do what Biden is doing for Obama right now, that he would be his butt boy and he could use Humphrey. When McCarthy went up to New Hampshire, and LBJ, who won the New Hampshire primary, but he won it by a slender amount, he saw the handwriting on the wall politically. And that's where Bobby Kennedy steps in, because he sees that LBJ's got one foot out the door. And Bobby, being an opportunist himself, says, I could beat McCarthy. And that's, you know, LBJ bails out. But LBJ does not bail out until he's convinced that Humphrey is going to do his bidding. And that's why he allows himself to get out.
Interesting. I had an old Italian buddy of mine, grew up homeless on the streets of New York City, actually, ended up at Yale. But he used to say his two favorite presidents were FDR and LBJ. And I asked him why. He said, because they both had the cojones to kill the other guy. He was referring to FDR and Huey Long, and because you know I was a Huey Long fan, and LBJ and JFK. I mean, he had a sort of dark view of the world in a certain sense.
There's a great story about Jim Garrison, by the way. Somehow arranges to meet JFK, and he leaves his wife behind, takes a hot smoking airline stewardess with him, goes to DC to meet the president, has sex with her all night, hungover, misses the appointment with the president, ends up with RFK at the Justice Department, goes back to New Orleans, and they said, how'd it go? He said, look, I didn't get to meet the president, but you can always meet a president. You can't get a fine piece of ass like that all the time.
Yeah, Garrison had a very interesting very colorful New
Yes.
Orleans style private life.
You know, I
Wow.
got the somewhere here is the key to the city to New Orleans. And I got the key to the city to New Orleans from a mayor named Sidney J. Bartholomew. And Bartholomew gave me the key to the city because I put on the world's largest toga party, Robert, at Tulane University on a football field with Otis Day and the Knights. And I don't know how we pulled this off, but the Guinness Book of World Records was there. I don't know if there's other contenders, but that gave me the key to the city. So I went up and gave a speech about being raised by Otis Day and the Knights as a white kid in a black family, just ripping.
Reverse Steve Martin.
Yeah, that's what. Well, yeah, this is 1987. You know, this when I got the key, and Otis was just cracking up. He's just going, "That white boy's crazy. I don't even know this guy." You know, and I got all tangled up in Otis's mic cord on the stage. We had landed from. This is when I was at National Lampoon. We landed and we said, "Take us to the Howard Stern of New Orleans," whoever that is, the DJ. So they take us to this shock jock. We immediately lock him out of his own studio and start broadcasting live under the influence until Louisiana state troopers showed up banging on the glass, which took about an hour or two of us broadcasting. So I got.
Did you get the key after or before that?
What's that?
Did you get the key after or before that?
No, way after. I got the.
Oh, wow.
They don't frown on that in New Orleans. We got along. We got along.
Yeah, New Orleans is the other side of American political, social, and cultural life, sort of the
Right.
underbelly of a kind.
Right.
So it's, it's not a coincidence that it would become a central place for a wide range of interesting activities, particularly in the 60s and 70s.
You know, I've said it's the Casablanca of America. I mean,
Yes.
you know, look, stuff that's going on there. Talk to Ted Cruz's father, what he was doing down there.
That's what Trump put poor Teddy over the edge.
Right.
When he wanted Cruz to get out of the primary, get out of the race after Indiana. So the morning of the Indiana race, Trump jumps on, one of the morning Fox News things and starts going off. He goes, what was Ted Cruz's dad doing near the grassy knoll? What was he doing down there? We got to find out. And Cruz went nuts that night.
He did say, that's funny because I have a photo of Cruz with Oswald passing out literature in New Orleans. There's a photo of him in the background. And obviously it's not the grassy knoll, but he was some kind of, I assume, an operative at that point, Cruz's dad. He ends up working for
the way he got to Cuba in the U.S. and some of his early days would all point to some sort of intelligence operation connected activities.
Right. He ends up in an oil company working in Canada. Then he ends up in Texas. I mean, just not your normal Mexican gardener. Let me put it that way.
Well, speaking of CIA, Mark, you had a movie that you wrote, and it'll be a second movie reference. And I don't know if Barnes knows it, but was it Last Recruit?
No, it started out as a movie called The Farm, right? And it was on the front page of Variety. I had it, hadn't written.
Oh, I got to tell you, hold on, before you get started, you said The Farm. There's nothing more fun than having CIA agents on and asking them, so have you heard of Camp Perry?
What do they say? No, or what?
What?
Obviously, right. Okay.
Anyway, I kid you not, and I'll usually mess with them and cut it out. But since there's nobody at CIA on here, it's a delight. I'm telling you, it's a good little hobby.
So I write this thing called The Farm, which later became The Recruit, and later the name went back and forth 10 times, but it ended up being with Colin Farrell and Al Pacino, and it is what it is. But the point there is on the front page of Variety, I came up with this thing, I pitched it, got optioned, and a guy left the company, took it with him to Spyglass. And Spyglass starts to make the picture, and my agent says, well, our client wrote this. Where's our take on this thing as the first writer? And they said, we don't know anything about it. We've never seen him in our lives, right? So we end up in federal court, Robert, right? And before we get to federal court, there is what's known as a deposition, right? So we start to depose the first writer, and he is Robert Towne, the famous writer of Chinatown's drunken failed brother, Roger Towne, who shows up smelling of alcohol for a deposition at 8 a.m., 9 a.m. in the morning. And I've got two attorneys. One's a former assistant DA of San Francisco, and then a top criminal attorney out of Miami. And so these two guys start to depose him. And we find out, lo and behold, from the faxes that are going back and forth to Langley, that the CIA is not only giving him notes, which he claims in the deposition, they're writing the script and he's giving them notes. Because you could tell from the footer and the headers of the faxes that he's sending notes back to them at Langley. And it's being written by a CIA operative named Chase Brandon, who makes his bones doing this type of thing. So where me and my lawyer look at each other and we start to press them on this. The two of them leave the room, this Roger Town and his lawyer, come back and invoke national security. So my lawyer says, this is a civil suit over intellectual property. You can't invoke national security, and let alone this is what they're doing. So they refused to comment any further. And it turns out the CIA was writing my script and using this guy as a front. This guy, Roger Town. Anyway, so we go to, this is also in a book, which you can read, called The CIA in Hollywood, written by Tricia Jenkins, who's a communication professor out of University of Texas in Austin. There's a whole chapter on my case. But we end up in federal court. And just so you know, your original script in Hollywood is judged by the finished movie artistically. When you have a lawsuit of intellectual property theft, they've got you coming and going. So your rough first draft, no matter how many writers and editors and everything, is judged against the finished film. It's a tough bar. Tough bar. But I mean, I got a settlement out of it or whatever. But the best revelation was that the CIA's involvement in Hollywood was more important to me than the settlement itself. That's why I'm mentioning this story.
Yeah, I mean, the worst version of that, or the most notorious, is Zero Dark 30.
Right.
I mean, that's basically a fictional film
Yeah.
that the CIA wrote that has nothing to do with how they caught bin Laden for the most part.
Right.
Even assuming you buy everything about that. I mean, it's kind of, what movie was it? Some movie where Ben Kingsley plays a fake terrorist. He's like an actor doing these things, but he's blamed for all these things.
Right.
And it's really loosely based on how you could perceive bin Laden, in that he became sort of a poster boy of something, but not a lot of evidence of actually any direct planning. And then you find out he's hanging out in Pakistan next to a bunch of generals, watching porn movies. So, I mean, it's like, what exactly?
Well, they don't even hide it anymore, Robert. They have an office right there now in the studios. This is not even back then. This was in early 2000. Back then, it was kind of a secretive thing. Not anymore.
Yeah, no, it's now much more open. And once they could get away with it with Zero Dark 30, have the Academy celebrate it, have the media celebrate it. People still think, oh, the torture was integral to. No, it wasn't. That torture went nowhere. That failed abominably. That's why they had to burn tapes and destroy evidence and hide information. John Brennan was part of that whole operation. John Durham was the guy who managed to cover it up for all those people who think John Durham someday is coming to
No one's ever seen, he's in a witness protection program, I think, in France. Yeah. No one's ever seen this guy ever again. There's not even any video of this man. This is a guy who disappeared.
As soon as Bill Barr picked him, I was trying to tell people that probably doesn't signal something good, because this guy's real name to fame was how he managed to bury the CIA corruption stories about Guantanamo and torture, and more importantly, or equally importantly, what they did to the Senate. I mean, they were spying on the Senate, destroying records, destroying information. I mean, it was one thing after the next, gave a sense of their arrogance. But yeah, it's amazing. I still run into people who, believe Zero Dark 30 was an honest, accurate film. No, it's CIA propaganda. That's all it is.
Also, Argo is another one. The Company of Spies is another one. I mean, there's so many. There's a whole genre. I wanted to do a book of just these films, like a Hollywood book on all of them,
one of the better documentary. Let's see how it goes.
One of the better ones.
I have a couple. I have a doc proposal on Hollywood and the CIA, and of course, no one's going to touch anything anymore. I mean, we now got the Chinese editing our own film. A friend of mine, Shane Black, who did Iron Man 3, and Iron Man 3. To get into the Chinese market, they simply took the third act, cut out his movie, and filmed their own third act. Nobody even knows this. I mean, they built villages. They had their own Iron Man. They have an entire separate third act of Iron Man 3 in China that no one's ever seen.
I mean, the only people who really broached this were South Park, and they got into huge trouble. In fact, China got so enraged that they have now banned all forms of South Park in China, removed all Facebook
The
things,
remake
all
of
YouTube
Top Gun,
things.
they made them take off all the patches on the remake. My favorite story though is because I'm working on a kind of a Red Dawn, a new version of Red Dawn. The remake of Red Dawn, which has North Koreans in it, was originally Chinese. Every logo is
That's
a
much
Chinese
more realistic.
Yes, yes. And they shot the entire thing. And the Chinese said, if you want to get in the market, you got to get rid of those Chinese soldiers and Chinese everything. So they reshot it with North Koreans. And then they said, here it is, let us in the market. And China says, sorry, we just fucked you. And they wouldn't let them in. I mean, you got to give it to the Chinese. They made them reshoot that whole movie with North Korean soldiers, you know, with just uniforms and different crap. But wow.
Viva Fry has to step in. Blame China.
That's funny. That's funny.
South Park, yeah, from Blame Canada. I mean, South Park's only one of the few that's willing to broach this. I mean, otherwise it's all suppressed. All, you know,
I think they're grandfathered in somehow because honestly, you know, Simpsons already rolled over.
Right.
But some reason they've managed to stay in there barely. They're sort of like Bill Burr. Bill Burr's managed to kind of hold on, or Ricky Gervais. I feel like Ricky Gervais is pretty good about this shit. But
well, who weeps for Louis C.K.? Where does he live? I mean, where is there a place like I did a piece for Lampoon in the 80s called Dictators Island, where all these fallen dictators, it was Dictators Club Med, where all of these fallen dictators went to a Club Med in the Caribbean, lived out the rest of their lives. There was like Baby Doc Duvalier, and I forget, there was 4 or 5 of them had been taken out in a couple of year period. And I said, nobody knew where these guys were. I said, they're all in the Dictators Club Med in the Caribbean. You know, where are these comics? Where do they live? How do they function? You know.
Well, I remember when Bond films used to really sort of riff off of existing characters. You know, they riffed off of Howard Hughes in one. They riffed off of Doc Duvalier in one. I forget which one it was, but it was a well done one. That, you know, had him really secretly running the drug trade in New York while he was the Haitian dictator. I mean, they featured New Orleans, of course, prominently in it. That was one of the better Bond films. But, you know, these days they stay away from all that. Instead, we're probably going to have some sort of like transgender Bond as the next Bond.
Oh, you're making me nervous. We did a piece at Lampoon called Diuretics before I was there. So that's before I was there. But anyway, so there was a guy named Ingram who was their muscle. He was a Scientology muscle, and he was a defrocked LAPD cop who had run a brothel in Koreatown, became the muscle for Scientology. He showed up in my office in New York with a 38 police special, asking me to wear a wire to take down my fellow editors. And then he went door to door telling our neighbors that we were drug dealers and pedophiles in New York. And they said, yes, we know that. This is New York. Yeah, they didn't care. And this guy, Ingram, who may or may not still be with him, was the thug, you know, who enforced any humor against them. So I ran into a guy, and he said the same thing happened to him. He was a rock and roll musician. And I said, really? You met Ingram? He says, yeah, he tried to intimidate me, took a gun out. And I said, what was your crime? He said, he wanted me to change the name of my band, and I refused to do it. I said, what was the name of your band? He said, L. Ron Hitler.
Well, that's, you know, it's amazing how many, if James Ellroy wrote a successor to the American Tabloid trilogy, which is still, I tell people, if you want a template for American history, read the American Tabloid trilogy by James Ellroy.
Right.
Yeah, that character is like right out of it, you know. Cop, runs a brothel, ends up being muscle for the Scientologist. I mean, it's just crazy overlaps. Though I got to give Hubbard credit. You know, his integration of self-help psychology, used car salesman techniques, science fiction, and he made a religion out of it. And he got a bunch of celebrities to bite into it. Which that part's not that so big of a surprise. LA is like the capital of crazy religions. But what an amazing scam that guy pulled off.
I had a girlfriend who joined the Unification Church, and they took it with a deprogrammers actually kidnapped her back, and she was never ever the same. She was always had like a flattened affect after that, after they had deprogrammed her. But I went to a place called Bard College, Robert, which was up on the Hudson River, and Walter Winchell called it the Little Red Whorehouse on the Hudson in 1953. It's just filled with communist chicks. And when I got there, next door was the Unification Church in a town called Barrytown, and Reverend Moon showed up, and he was at that place, and he was told not to trespass onto the college property. and he came onto the property, was summarily arrested for trespassing. And we went into town for the arraignment at the courthouse, and Moon didn't show up, but 10 or 15 lawyers of his showed up. And there had been all kinds of crazy crap going on with that church the whole year. People running naked in the night through the rain, being tackled and dragged back. We would go over there. We would see people carrying sticks, getting on their knees, planting them in holes in the dirt. I had a friend named Stephen Pucci, who infiltrated a Puerto Rican drug dealer who was going to college with me. He infiltrated to find the money in the church. And he ended up in a documentary running out in the middle of the night, trying to escape. But anyway, so Moon gets arrested. The lawyers show up. The press from New York comes up the Hudson River to this town, which is 90 miles out of New York. And they're holding a press conference. And I start to recite all these crimes against everybody that we've seen in the past year. And they start chanting, "Death to you, death to you, death to you," to me. So now I'm on Reverend Moon's death list, which is not a place you want to be. And we went back and watched. What's that?
Is this before he bought the Washington Times or after?
Oh, that's a good question. Before. There was before, yes. Because he also bought the Penta Hotel in New York, and he also had the world's largest marriage at Madison Square Garden with like 20,000 people getting married at once. And, it was a Christian-based cult, but the key to it was sensory deprivation. They always kept two people on you. Night and day, kept you up for 18 hours, very little sleep, very little food, sensory deprivation all through it.
Mm-hmm.
And years later, there was one called the Forum, which was a spin-off of Werner Erhard's Est. The Forum tried to get people in New York to join it. And I went to, my girlfriend had gotten hooked on this, another girlfriend who got into this cult, not even the same girlfriend, a different girlfriend. So they kept calling it home. They wanted money. It was kind of Scientology-esque. And I went down there for their free seminar. And there was about 500 people in this hotel around by Penn Station. And they took a break. And the girl next to me said, "I think this is pretty good. I'm going to join. Are you going to join?" And the other girl on the other side of me says the same thing. So I stand up and I go, "Why are they planting people in the audience trying to convert us to this cult?" And all hell breaks loose. All hell breaks loose in this place. And it just melted down. But you don't see good cults anymore, Robert. Remember, what I'm trying to say, in the 70s and 80s, America was filled with cults.
Yeah.
Now,
we have NXIVM, and by the way, tonight's other guest was supposed to be somebody involved with them.
Yeah.
So I guess that the most recent decent cult.
And they were just sort of mid-tier. I mean, it was just one guy abusing some women. It was nothing like the Jesus people, like Jim Jones. I mean, it was nothing on that.
It's MLM, Barnes. It's MLM. You see, we've gotten
that's all it is. Multi-level marketing.
Right.
And by the way, that's what Scientology is. I mean, NXIVM is a ripoff of Scientology in a lot of ways.
Yeah, that was a smart part.
And they all come out of, and you can think Napoleon Hill. There's a guy that's fun to dig into a little bit.
Him, I don't know.
And the secret.
I don't know about
Think and Grow Rich. All the scammers, Gary V, all of them follow Napoleon Hill, pretty much.
Really? Who is I don't know Napoleon Hill either.
Yeah, I don't know. You know who that is?
He wrote Think and Grow Rich, and it's called The Law of Attraction.
Right.
You remember the book The Secret that went wild with Oprah? That was based on Napoleon Hill's work from 1929. Or somewhere in there about. And Napoleon Hill's story, you'll like this Andrew Carnegie. Supposedly Napoleon Hill went to Andrew Carnegie, and Andrew Carnegie said, "You need to get with all the rich people in the world and document exactly why they became rich. And this is your mission." And so suddenly Napoleon Hill was given the grace by the smartest man ever to talk to every robber baron, et cetera, out there and come up with what was going on. And that was what became the law of attraction.
Okay.
Well, I didn't know until watching a documentary recently that was put out on Charlie Manson, how much he was influenced by, what's the book, How to Get Friends?
Chaos.
And
Dale Carnegie.
Yeah.
Dale
Dale Carnegie was a huge influence on Charlie Manson, because the man was, you go through his history, not super bright. There's nothing there that says this guy's he came from a long family line of dumb criminals. not just criminals, but dumb criminals.
Well, you should
That
read,
got,
Oh yeah.
read Chaos.
His mother's a prostitute, and yeah, I mean, he was locked up. He was locked up as a kid all the way through. I mean, he's just
yeah, oh
a
yeah,
rough time.
all
Well,
that.
if you see,
And
if you
he got
see,
caught in half-ass ways. You know, he'd steal a car and keep the car with the same license plate. I mean, stuff like that. But apparently, one of his revolutionary time periods. I mean, there's LSD and everything connected to that. But putting that aside, was Dale Carnegie. That's what taught him how to persuade people.
That
Which
book is important.
Yeah.
That's a
Chaos.
seminal work.
Chaos.
That and Cialdini. I
Read,
would
read
say
Tom
that.
O'Neill's book Chaos. I mean, that'll open your eyes. That book is absolutely fucking well documented. It took him 22 years to write. You know, I was talking to him a month ago. We were talking about mind control again with Sirhan. He wants to get into that as his next thing, and my RFK thing kind of explores it. That's what I'm glad you got the
And
book.
you told him, you know, a show that he can go on, right?
What's
When you were talking to him, right?
Yeah. Well, I was talking to Eric about this guy named William J. Bryan Jr., a descendant of William Jennings Bryan Jr., Sr., who was his great grandfather. And this guy is the MKUltra hypnotist before Jolly West, Robert. This is the guy who deprogrammed our POWs when they came back from Korea. This is a guy who worked as a consultant on the Manchurian Candidate. This is a guy who worked with F. Lee Bailey on the Albert DeSalvo hypnotism, and also with Melvin Belli, worked on all these major cases. He invented jury selection, Robert. You may want to read the book that he's holding up right there. No, not Spiritism. Not that.
No,
book.
I know. I've got the other book elsewhere.
The
But,
Chosen Ones. The Chosen
but this is a guy he worked with too. If he was with MKUltra, he was with Estabrook.
Oh yeah, I'm assuming it. Yeah. I mean, there's a guy. I'll tell you, there's a guy named Robert Heath who's down at Tulane. That when I was doing my Oswald research, Heath was experimenting with LSD, and Tulane is such a CIA school. It's just the craziest, total CIA university in the United States.
That must explain why the law school was the only law school not to offer me a full scholarship. Because I'd planned on going to Tulane. I wanted to go to law school in New Orleans, and they were the only ones not to give me a full ride. Everybody else, I mean, schools way above Tulane gave me a full ride, but not. I guess that was good for me because I mean I had a problem going to class anyway. If I'd been in New Orleans, that never would have happened. But but yeah, because I was a big I loved the New Orleans culture and all the rest. But sorry, go ahead.
No, I'm just saying that Heath was involved in mind control, and so was Jolly West. But before Jolly West, this guy William Bryan has a hypnotist situation here in Hollywood, where he's hypnotizing young girls, and he's giving seminars on how to hypnotize young girls and have sex with them all around the country. He eventually gets his medical license revoked. He's it law license and a medical license. He loses his medical license.
He's the original pickup artist.
But he's using hypnosis. Put it this way: he goes into F. Lee Bailey's office. F. Lee Bailey is in Boston, and they get like 8 attorneys in there, and he hypnotizes 8 attorneys in F. Lee Bailey's office. When they wake up, 8 of them have syringes hanging out of their hands that he put in there while they were under hypnosis. I mean, this guy was the master of the master, William Bryan. And the reason he's of interest is people believe that he was the one that programmed Sirhan. And he.
I mean, Sirhan, he definitely demonstrates behavior that's consistent with something to that effect. Yeah. Speaking, by the way, briefly of Melvin Belli, he has one of my favorite all-time closing arguments. He was the lawyer who his client was accused of poisoning, and back then you would actually have the physical evidence inside the courtroom. Mm-hmm. And his whole closing argument was he took up the poison and he said the government alleges to you this is poison. Drank it, put it down, and he says, would I drink it if it was poison? Sat down, waited for the jury to leave, walked out slowly out of the courthouse, then ran quickly back to his office where they had the stomach pump. And
that's great.
Yeah. His client was acquitted. I was like, that's commitment.
Dude, I once did this. I did this peaceful lampoon called Sexual Jeopardy, the home game, right? And the reason I'm mentioning it is got the questions on the back, and the same as Jeopardy, right? It's, I got sued by Merv Griffin, right, for taking a Jeopardy. Goes to federal court. The judge is up there in his robes. He starts reading everyone, cracks up laughing, and throws it out under the parody law. The case lasted a couple hours. I just thought you might like that.
Oh, yeah. Merv has an interest. He has an interesting history too.
Oh yeah.
He was the first Merv the Perv, but that's another story.
Well, I also did
Right.
the Klaus Barbie doll, where we had to dress up Klaus Barbie in color forms when he was arrested and going to stand trial in France. We came up with different. The art department of Lampoon was magnificent. They would do anything, any crazy harebrained thing. I came up with Capitalist Hall of Fame plaques where on the back of their bios. But the killer one, Robert, the one that was really controversial was mass murder of baseball cards. I had seen the Associated Press listing mass murderers, I swear to God, as if they were home run leaders in Major League Baseball. And as a political statement, because most of my stuff was political art that I did at Lampoon, I decided to make baseball cards out of them. And this became just a cause celeb. I did a lot of press at the time, because I was mocking the Associated Press's glorification of mass murder, But anyway.
I
I
have a
also
question.
got work with the wonderful David Pecker at AMI, who I'm sure you're aware of, where I did this I'll land my UFO on Bourbon Street on Fat Tuesday, Robert. And other great pieces of literature like Blimp to lower world's fattest man into Super Bowl.
What's fascinating is how much he got into trouble because of his ties with Trump. It's amazing how he got caught up in the middle of all that. Because
I know.
I mean, that's commonplace. I mean, they keep Marty Singer on payroll, a lot of celebrities, just to make sure what Trump did, Marty Singer helps take care of it in LA. So I mean,
I got a single letter here. Last year I got a single letter. I was deplatformed by the local newspaper because she got a single letter. That was the end of my Dodger Confidential sports column, because I had seen the owner of the Dodgers was having an affair with this woman that he worked, Mark Walters, out of this hedge fund in Chicago, and he was having an affair. And Singer claimed that my merely reprinting it did not absolve me of defaming his client, Robert, even though it was on page 6 in the New York Post. And the publisher got scared and fired me.
Marty writes a lot more letters than he brings suits, folks. I remember I had a client that was Eddie Murphy's ex, and I had a meeting with Marty on another case that we were co-counsel on. And I mentioned, I'm representing her. And he was like, she's not going to tell certain stories, right? That was his first response. I was like, Marty, I thought none of those stories were true when you were sending out all those letters out about Eddie. So yeah, but great lawyer, great respect.
He wrote a good letter. I read the letter. I wanted to fire myself, Robert. I was totally scared. Dude, I felt I was criminal number 1 after reading that Singer letter.
His letters are masterful. Great letters.
Dude, I didn't even know. I said, look, if you would have told me she was your client, I never would have written the fucking thing.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, he kept Tiger Woods' problems under wraps for a long time.
Right.
I mean, there were a lot of different scholarship funds being set up around the country.
That's right. So anyway, so the RFK thing, we're trying to get that made. I'm also doing a thing on the Elliott Smith. You want to talk about pop culture? There's a guy named Elliott Smith. I don't know if you two guys, you might be a little too old for this, but Elliott Smith was a singer-songwriter out of Portland who had a song called Ms. Misery, did the soundtrack for Good Will Hunting. He got nominated for an Oscar 2001. He becomes a huge singer-songwriter, like the Bob Dylan of his generation. So it ends up where in the middle of the day, somehow he either takes a butcher knife and stabs himself in the heart twice, or his girlfriend stabbed him in the heart twice. And it's still an open case with LAPD. So there's a true crime series we're dealing with now with Netflix trying to get that made.
So
maybe it was one each.
What's
so
that?
He had a
One
Gary
each.
Webb.
Maybe he did one and she did one.
Well, she claims that in the middle of the day, he decides to, while she's in the shower having had a fight with him, her being a heroin addict and his heroin dealer, he decides to take a butcher knife, stab himself twice in the heart without any hesitation wounds or anything. And she comes out and there's his butcher knife in his heart. So of course she pulls it out. And then her fingerprints are on the weapon, but she says it's a suicide because this is a guy who wrote songs about suicide. So it's not that, it's not that crazy, Robert. I mean, this guy might as well, maybe, but here's a guy clean off of drugs and alcohol for a year, about to go on a European tour and dump her. And she and him are in like a Sid and Nancy, Kurt Cobain, Courtney Love thing for the past year. And actually, Courtney Love said it was the greatest murder-suicide she ever heard about. You know, because she knew.
She would know.
Oh no, she knew. I mean, of course she knew. So the case is still an open case, and I really, you know, I don't know what happened, to be honest with you. So we're going to play it both ways and let the viewers decide. You know, but
he died Gary Webb style.
Gary Webb style. You know,
Yeah.
I once asked Dallas Taylor, the drummer for Crosby, Stills and Nash, who told me he stabbed himself in the stomach with a butcher knife and jumped out the window, woke up in a dumpster, if a guy could stab himself twice. And he said, no fucking way. I could barely do it once, and I'm a successful stabber. He said, there's no way you could take a butcher knife and stab yourself in the heart twice, Robert, twice.
Well, I mean, that was the Gary Webb thing. Obviously, the autopsy guy didn't know what he was doing the first time, or didn't realize the consequences of what he was saying. When he said, "Oh, you know, it looks like Webb's been shot twice in the head." And for those who don't know, he's the one who broke the CIA Contra drug crack stories.
Mercury News, yeah,
exactly, in the 90s. And they later changed it to say no. It was another, like, it was like a JFK bullet. You know, managed to go like here, and then come back out and back in. You know, that routine.
Well, the Noguchi autopsy of RFK was considered the greatest autopsy of all time. And Noguchi brought in the top coroners of the three branches of the military to oversee it because he did not want a debacle like Dallas, he said publicly. So when he does the autopsy of RFK, he goes to such lengths as to bring in the heads of pigs and to put the gun muzzle up to their head from different lengths of inches and feet, to look at the powder blast on the head of the pigs, and determines that the gun, in the case of killing Robert Kennedy, is between point blank skin range or 1 to 3 inches away behind the ear.
Damn. That's thorough.
That's the autopsy that the LAPD embraces. So when it comes to go to trial, they don't bother to look at the autopsy distance, and they read it and they yank him off the stand in mid-trial, Robert, because he's about to say that the gun was literally kissing the back of his head in terms of powder burns. And they thought it said 1 to 3 feet. It said 1 to 3 inches. Noguchi gets fired. They smear Noguchi, saying he would dance around corpses naked on pep pills. Gets fired. He lawyers up, gets his job back, but he wouldn't testify on behalf of what the LAPD wanted. And they tried to intimidate him, and he didn't buckle, which is a great story. And the protagonist in my story is a guy named Baxter Ward, who was the #1 newscaster in LA back in the day. He was the highest paid local newscaster. He was on ABC News, this guy. Baxter Ward from Wisconsin. He comes from a wealthy political family. His father was a judge on the Wisconsin State Supreme Court. And he's kind of like a rogue playboy type, but he ends up being a multimillionaire as the top newscaster in the LA market. This guy begins to run shows and interview shows on ABC News about the assassination. And that propels the storyline of my script through Baxter Ward, not unlike Jim Garrison and JFK. So we see this movie through Baxter Ward, who then, after he puts together this crack crew, like at a spotlight, you know, to investigate the assassination of RFK, realizes that he can't go any further, decides to run for county supervisor of Los Angeles to keep this hunt going. And he wins the county supervisor's seat of one of the 5 kings in LA, and then has a coroner's hearing because he puts himself in charge of the coroner's committee, and he brings in Noguchi to testify in the open hearing about what I just described to you. It's a fascinating story about the RFK case that nobody knows about through the eyes of Baxter Ward. Very interesting guy.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I remember reading James Elroy. It's either second, I think it's his third book, maybe Bloods a Rover. That the first one's American Tabloid, the second one is Cold 6000. But the way he paralleled the headlines between RFK and MLK, even if you didn't know anything about where that ends up, you knew by the way in which, like, these guys are paralleling each other in challenging institutional narratives that is going to put them at severe risk.
Absolutely. I mean, this case is so crazy. It's such an easy case to solve. It makes the JFK case look like a Chinese Pandora's box. This thing, because of the autopsy of Noguchi, you can't even argue with this thing. This is a perfect autopsy that Noguchi does. I mean, it's insane how much the LAPD has pushed back against this case and how they've intimidated witnesses, destroyed property, I mean, obviously, Thane Eugene Caesar, the guard who was in back of RFK, shoots him under the arm and in back of the head. He's right in back of him. The bullets go up into the ceiling. So what does LAPD do? They take the ceiling panels and destroy them where the bullets are going. I talked to Paul Schrade the other day. He was hit in the head. He's the first guy to get shot in the middle of the head by Sirhan. He gets shot. He's the first one. All 5 people get shot by Sirhan in back of RFK. Boom, 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 5 in a row, various shots. And Schrade, has fought a long battle to get this case reopened. He's 95 years old now and still completely coherent, Robert. Still remembers it like it was yesterday.
I mean, I think he's the one who talked to Bobby Jr. and led Bobby Jr.
That's right. He said that Bobby Jr. showed up with all his kids, and he told Schrade to explain the whole night to his kids. The whole thing. It took hours. Schrade said it took him 3 hours to explain to the grandchildren everything that happened to their grandfather. And that's why Bobby brought them out here. Well, he's pretty close to me. He lives in the Hollywood Hills over here, Schrade.
Have you recorded all that, I hope, when you talk to him? I mean, to get it down, because 95, I mean, you have a witness. It would be good to have that.
Thomas Jane and I we're going to go over and talk to him personally, and then we're going to film the thing. He was worried about COVID. He didn't want us to expose him, because of his age. So we're trying to get in there now to film an interview with Schrade, who
are you working with on it?
Thomas Jane, the actor.
Okay. I didn't know if Oliver was involved or not.
Oliver, we're going to try to get him to executive produce it. Oliver said, ironically, love the script, too close to JFK. And I said, that's intentional. And he goes, sorry, it's just too close artistically. And we argued, believe me, we've had some arguments over the RFK thing, but we'll probably executive produce it, at the best we could do. But yeah, it is a case that nobody knows anything about. They think they do. When RFK says at San Fernando Valley College, which is now Cal State Northridge, that he's going to reopen the investigation into his brother's death, and that was in March of 1968. That's what I think started to turn the wheels to get him out of the way, because he had never said that ever before. And Adam Walensky, who went to Yale, who was one of his, I don't know if you know Walensky, and a bunch of his aides, all were shocked that day when Kennedy said that he was going to look into it once he became president.
Well, really I always say there's really 2 RFKs. There's the pre-brother assassination RFK, which is one kind of politician. And then there's a very different one that comes in, particularly that starts to peak in 1967 and early 1968. I mean, and that's what what really hammered it home for me. It was just Elroy going through headlines back and forth of, I mean, both King and Kennedy RFK both went off the res in terms of institutional narrative in 67, 68 on a wide range of critical.
The war, obviously, right?
Yeah, the war was the big one, but basically challenging the core of what was then the relatively young deep state power at multiple levels, challenging their assumptions, challenging their entitlement, challenging the consequences of their policies, and just hammering. And it's extraordinary, and it becomes predictable at that point. The only question becomes what exactly happened with the security lapses that night at the hotel, because that's always the other giveaway. There's something afoot.
It was a relationship with LAPD where they did not want them there. Both sides did not like each other. Mayor Yorty and LAPD was not asked to be there. Were told not to be there. They hire their own private security. He was doing this in LA all through the town anyway. It's not like LAPD didn't offer. They were told you're not wanted, literally. I mean, he had an FBI agent who was his main bodyguard, and he had Rosie Greer and the other decathlon champion who ends up with the gun in the case. But I mean, they all talked about Sirhan's superhuman strength, like he was in a trance, Robert. Like he just kept firing the gun even when it was empty, just couldn't be stopped. But I mean, RFK Jr. going to meet him in jail 4 or 5 times, apparently, right?
I know of at least several. I don't know of how many, but that's from what I've seen from published reports.
Right.
And this is around the same time as, I forget which book he put out, but he put out a book where he did an interview, I think with ABC, where he talks about the historic animosity between his father and uncle with the CIA in particular. I mean, he's, talking about what some of these core concerns are. And of course, he himself is sort of a chip off the old block, and that is willing to challenge institutional narratives that other people on the left won't. And he's been more assertive in the COVID context, especially about lockdown policies and the rest, and very critical of Bill Gates, especially. So, he's following up on that side of the family tradition, because there was always a bifurcated family tradition. There was grandfather, who was really more power driven than anything else.
Mhm.
And then there was this sort of philosophical, idealistic side of both JFK and RFK that sort of was on a whole different path.
Well, in
And as
his
with
memoir, in RFK Jr.'s memoir, he talks about the fact that his father did not believe that the mob was involved simply because he had them all wiretapped. And he was able to listen to the wiretaps all the time. And he did not believe, although obviously Ruby was paid $50,000 by the Campisi brothers. He buys a safe. He has the safe bolted to the floor upstairs in his nightclub. By the way, Ruby is gay and he's addicted to Dexedrine nonstop. He never touches the girls because he's living with a gay guy, right outside of town. But the fact of the matter is, the $50,000 that Ruby is paid is for the hit on Oswald, and he gets cold feet. He goes over there Friday night to the jail, and he says that it's a fair play for Cuba committee. This is their Saturday night. He starts calling up on the phone saying Oswald's going to be hit to move him, and he's doing it so he doesn't have to do it. He doesn't want to do the hit, but he's already got the 50 grand. He signs over his attorney, his life to his attorney, says, take care of my back taxes. I mean, 50 grand is like the equivalent of, $350,000 today, Robert. It's in the safe, and he signs it over to his attorney, says, I'm not coming back. He takes his Dachshunds, puts them in the car, takes about 7 Dexedrine, and goes in. He's right down the ramp, and he shoots him, and that's the end of it. Because they had promised the media in Dallas that there would be an hours-long news conference the next day with Oswald, and that could not be allowed to happen. That was the final day, Sunday, that this was, he had to be put down. So
what I love is the way the cops are pushing Oswald forward. Just like LBJ was smart enough to make sure there was a roof on the car he was going to be riding in, and he wasn't going to be in the same car as JFK.
LBJ's got the Secret Service microphone, the speaker hung over the seat so he could listen to it. And they're going, look, that's ours. He goes, give me that goddamn thing. And he's draping the coiled cord over the seat into the back. We're sitting there with the liberal senator from Texas. How Connolly fought to the death not to be in that car. That was one of the biggest knockdown fights they've ever had, was between LBJ and JFK, because he didn't want Ralph Yarborough, the liberal, in the same car as him. He said to LBJ, that defeats its own purpose. I got to be with Connolly. And Connolly's going, I ain't sitting up there. And LBJ said, tough break, buddy. Just keep your head down. And Ralph Yarborough is back in the car with LBJ.
Classic. Well,
we
go ahead.
We definitely have to wrap it up on this round, but I'm hoping to have you guys back, because I know we can definitely riff forever. And I'm going to steal the Barnes. I'm nowhere near as good at it, but unstructured.locals.com. I've even got a little couple shorts in there from Mark Groubert. And who knows, I may talk him into revealing a couple other stories here and there. And then, of course, vivabarneslaw.locals.com, where you have Hush Hush, which is very inspiring to all of this here. And if you guys like this and want to get them to come back, you got to subscribe so they want to come back. So for now,
Robert, I just want to personally thank you for what you're doing. I can't thank you enough for what it seems like the weight of the Republic is now upon your shoulders. And it's just astonishing, the stuff that you have found yourself in the middle of.
That's true.
I'm older than you. I've lived through a lot of stuff, assassinations, war. I've never seen anything like we're going through now. And, I grew up in a political family, so I thought I've seen everything. But just a personal thank you for what you've been doing. It's amazing, amazing work.
Oh, great. Thanks.
Perfect. Thank you.